Okay, good morning. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting for February 25th, 2020 to order. As always, we'll start with a moment of silence. Do we have any dedications today?
I have two. Al Christensen of Upper Lake and Clint Want of Lucerne.
Dirksley, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, are there any extra items not appearing on the posted agenda today? Excellent. Go ahead and move right to consent agenda. Consent agenda are usually non-controversial items that we, push through. So are there any items from the board that needs to be pulled?
I have requested to pull item number 5.3, and if possible, moving it to next week's agenda on March 3rd, is it? Yeah. And I have been in communication with the Director of Behavioral Health Services, Tom Metcalf, and he agrees to make that happen. Still fits his timeline.
Be a non-timed item?
It can go back on consent afterwards.
Consent?
It just
Okay.
needed some clarifications.
All right, excellent. Are there any items that would like to be pulled from the public in the consent agenda? Hearing none, bring it back to the board for an action.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve consent agenda 5.1 through 5.2, and then 5.4 through 5.14.
Second.
Been a motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. All right, we're a little bit early here, so we'll go ahead and go to calendars. Tina?
This afternoon I'll be in the office, depending on how long our meeting goes today. Tomorrow I have doctor's appointments I have to get to with my children. On Wednesday, I will be in the office in the morning and then attending the AAA governing board. I will have to miss the juvenile hall meeting at 2 because EJ needs me to step in for the AAA. So
Is that on Thursday?
that's on Thursday.
Okay, yeah.
So I won't make it to that, so just let me know what
Will do.
happens, don't change it. And then we have a Sir Optimus night meeting, we're gonna be honoring Crystal Martin. And then on Friday, I will be in the office in the morning, or actually, no, I have a Hope Rising meeting in the morning, then I'll be in after that. On Saturday, I'm attending a breakfast at the school. It's going to be supporting one of the sports teams at the high school. And then attending Stars of Lake County that evening. And then back here on Monday.
Okay, Supervisor Spatier.
So I don't have anything else today after this meeting. Tomorrow, I'm going to be heading to a CC4C meeting. It's been a while since I've been able to get to one of those over in the city of Clear Lake. That's Citizens Caring for Clear Lake, who do a lot of cleanups and helping the city be a more beautified city. On Thursday, start off the day with our judge's breakfast, and then I will be doing another tour of Juvenile Hall. This time I'll be with our buildings and maintenance director to see what's possible and what potential costs might be for any changes. And before anything happens, of course, it will come to the board, just right now kind of looking at ideas of what to do. The rest of the week is fairly open since it's the end of the month. And on Saturday, I just want to mention I believe it starts at 10. I'll have to review that, but it's KBL's closing ceremony. That's Canuck Basketball League, and I just appreciate any nonprofit that always puts together sporting activities, any kind of activities for our youth. They've done a fabulous job. They have 400 students that play basketball from pre-K all the way to 8th grade, and it's just a good outlet, and I love it. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to coach in there for the last 4 years. Starting over again on Monday, Middle Creek Restoration Project, preparing for a Tuesday meeting, and then back here on Tuesday.
All right, excellent. Supervisor Brown?
Yeah, I have a couple of meetings after, depending upon what time we get done here. And then tomorrow, I'll be out in the Rivieras in Buckingham and Clear Lake Riviera, finishing up there, Riviera West, and then Riviera Heights, marking all of the addresses that are identified for possible abatement. There wasn't enough staff really to go out and do that, and so I offered to go out and do it and flag them, and that way the contractors can go out and find them readily. So I'll be doing that. And then on Thursday, we have the South Deal meeting in Ukiah with Caltrans, and I'll be out on Friday. Let's see, last Friday I was able to provide breakfast for the probation department, and this Friday I'll be providing lunch for the third floor and all of our planning staff and public services and county council.
What time do I need to be there?
When you've earned the role of being up on the third floor, you're welcome to come. The first floor will be coming soon, so. And back in the office on Monday. I'm hoping to finish up all the flagging and everything. If I don't finish it up Friday, then I'll finish it up on the weekend, so.
All right, thank you, Supervisor Brown. Supervisor Crandall?
My microphone wasn't on, sorry. I'm going to start with a couple of reports. I've been out since I want to say the 4th. I went to DC. When I went out there, I was on different business, but I also was able to bring in some county business. I talked with Garamendi, Thompson, and Lamalfa's staff. Garamendi is the only one that met with me. However, I discussed the intricacies of resiliency and recovery for fire, funding, BLM responsibility of their lands to, prevent from our lands being affected by that as well. Bruno and I attended the ad hoc committee last week. And it was pretty perfunctory, I guess you could say. And one of the benefits, I think, is Bruno got to see how the ad hoc works. And we were able to bring the Lake Pillsbury Alliance out with us, and they were able to sit in with us and hear what was going on. And Bruno had asked that with the studies of the feasibility study that's taken place by the planning agreement group, we were asking them to bring it back to the ad hoc committee so we can have some input there. And so I guess that's pretty much all I have for that. North Shore beautification. Before our Lucerne Town Hall last week, we had a meeting. It's kind of an initiative that was brought forth by some community members. Kenny Parlay, Lonnie Kane are chair for LATH. They've been meeting together with a lot of community members about cleaning up the North Shore. As you can see, I have a button on fight against blight. We're hoping that on actually it's scheduled for March 21st to have the North Shore Beautification Project at either New Paradigm College or if that doesn't work out, 13th Street in Lucerne. This will be a pilot project. We're hoping to connect with everybody on the North Shore, so Upper Lake, Nice, Lucerne. But because of some of the logistical issues with the waste company, we're going to go ahead and just concentrate on Lucerne first as a pilot and then move forward to the other Clear Lake Oaks or whoever else next. On that day, we'll be collecting e-waste, tires, white metal, and paint. And so that should be taking place on the 21st. So if you're on the North Shore and you want to be a part of that, come on out. And then Friday, I met with, there was a PG&E meeting here Friday that I wasn't able to attend, but I was able to schedule a meeting with Aaron Johnson prior to that, and I discussed the issues that we have on the North Shore with community resource centers. Back when the PSPSs were taking place, we had a spot in Upper Lake, but on Clear Lake Oaks, there was really no place for anybody to go to. So I wanted to make sure that they did a better job on putting up some resource centers for us, and talked about the grant and some other things that have to do with our Middle Creek Restoration Project, hoping that he could trickle that down to some people and working with us on the PG&E towers if that should ever flood. And so today, after the meeting, as long as it goes today, I'll be here. Thursday, I have a CLOGBA meeting. I have other conflicting meetings throughout the week with constituents. Monday, I'll be back we'll have the Middle Creek Restoration Project Committee meeting, and then I'll be meeting with Carol back here on Tuesday.
All right, thank you Supervisor Crandall. Do my calendar also. I'd like to report last week, attended the State Board of Fire Services on Thursday, the 20th in Sacramento. It's the 4th meeting I've been to. I think the most, obviously, there were a few different issues that we passed, but I know that we set in place the regulations and the training standards for burn bosses. So hopefully that'll be implemented here in the next few months, in the next 6 months. There's an opportunity where we can get back to some more prescribed burns and opportunities throughout the state of California. Thought that was a good, productive meeting over there on Thursday. Friday, attended the city and the county committee for PG&E. Obviously, right now, we had the CPUC here, and PG&E obviously appreciated them coming. But until our lives are affected less in these PSPSs, we'll be looking to see what they do for us this next year and continue the pressure on them. So I know the sheriff also had a listening session on Monday. So that's what's going on with those two meetings that happened here. Monday had the Risk Reduction Authority. We are moving right along. We have applied for a couple different grants, but I'm proud to say that we reached out to the Community Mitigation Assessment Team. There's never been one done here in California, and we've been approved to have them come here. 5 folks from the CMAT team at the federal level, from the USFS, United States Forest Service, come in and help us really do a community assessment and really get focused on how we're going to move forward with the Risk Reduction Authority. First time it's been done in California, so I was glad to have help from the U.S. Forest Service, BLM, CAL FIRE, all the fire departments, and the Risk Reduction Authority. It's going to be something that's going to, I think, put us off in the right direction. So we're excited about that. We also have solidified a meeting date on March 29th, which will be at the Twin Pine Event Center. It'll be our first educational outreach of the Risk Reduction Authority. And it's from 3 to 6 on March 29th. Please come and attend as we help ourselves move forward in this new era of fire and fire-safe county, which we're trying to move towards. This week, as Rob said, we have the South Deal Committee meeting on Thursday up in Ukiah. Also have agenda review today after the meeting as soon as it's completed. On Friday, I have office hours at the Gibson Museum. I know that the ADA restrooms are completed down there, and it's going to be my first meeting back there. So I already have constituents lined up. I'll be down there on Friday. And then I will also be attending the Stars of Lake County, which is the 29th, right, on that evening. So I'll be going to that and then back here on the 2nd and ready for the meeting on the 3rd. All right, thank you. Thank you, supervisors, for your calendars. We'll go ahead and move into public input. We do have public input today. We've got 3. We have Gary Pace, Health Officer. He's going to do an update on the coronavirus. We also have Charles Bain of Lucerne, who's going to do code enforcement and staffing. And Kevin Waycheck, Red Tag Houses in Lake County. So we'll go ahead and start with Dr. Gary Pace.
Gary Pace, Public Health Officer. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I should have gotten on the scheduled items, but I didn't think I had anything to report, but things sort of changed a little bit over the weekend, so that's why I thought it was wise to come in here. Basically, I want to give an update on the coronavirus and what the situation is and what preparations are being made in the county. Basically, I think the main message is that we're still at low risk in Lake County, but the situation is changing globally, and probably the messaging is going to be changing here in California and in the United States. And so I just thought it was wise, because I had sort of laid the groundwork for a certain way, and I think there's going to be a pivot here in the near future, and I think it's good for people to be aware of that. At this point, in the United States, there are 14 confirmed cases from within the United States, but there's been a bunch of these people coming in from the cruise ship. There's been 36 positive cases from there, and as people are probably aware from the news, that the situation is kind of exploding globally, and it's moving to different countries now. From China, it's in Korea, Italy, Iran, and pretty soon there's starting to be talk at the WHO level about calling it a pandemic. And once people start hearing that, people can get kind of anxious. But a pandemic just means that it's spread widely. It doesn't necessarily talk about how serious it is. We really don't know how serious this disease is going to be, whether it'll be sort of a mild, moderate, or a severe one. But I think it's just important, as these things start shifting, that people are aware what the implications of it are and what the context is. Again, in Lake County, there are no cases that we're aware of. There's a couple people in Humboldt County that were travelers that are back that have tested positive. There's a couple people in Napa County that were on the cruise ship that are positive. We actually, these folks are being, from the cruise ship, they're being housed at Travis Air Force Base. As they turn positive, the Solano County hospitals are pretty overwhelmed with the number of people, so they're starting to move them out. I got a call last night. They wanted to move 3 of them to Lake County, to the hospitals here. The hospitals didn't have the staffing to do it, but this is kind of the moving situation of these folks moving out and about and starting to try to figure out where to keep them. I think the messaging shift is going to be, we still don't have any community transmission in the United States that we're aware of. But as they're testing some of these folks on the cruise ship, they're asymptomatic, and some of them have never had symptoms, but because of their being on the ship, they've been tested and they're testing positive. So it's starting to change the way we think about it, and most likely this is going to get out in the larger community. And it looks like it's probably not a high fatality virus, and most people don't get seriously ill. Most people, it's a mild illness, or they don't even know it at all. But it's, we're going to be hearing more and more about it. This is probably going to be a long-term challenge for us. And in the health department, we're basically in communication with the smart folks in DC and in Sacramento, and sort of monitoring it and trying to work with our local partners here and trying to keep everybody apprised of it. So that's basically what I wanted to let everybody know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pearson. So we'll move to Charles Bain from Lucerne, Code Enforcement Staff.
Yes, my name's Charles Bean. I'm from Lucerne, and thank you for listening to our concerns. And I would just hoping that you can find some money to have an extra code enforcement officer during the abatement season, the weed and marijuana abatement season, which will, during that season, that'll only leave one officer for the entire county, which will take us right back to where we were
It's on the agenda.
previously.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Apologize.
Sorry.
All right.
It actually works out good because we can actually respond to you at that point. So that's,
Okay, so
that
then I
kind
can
of-
speak then?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, next will be Kevin Waycheck. And if this is code enforcement, this says red tagged houses.
Yes, I'm Ken Wasick, live in Lucerne. At our town meeting last week, we had an issue come up on red tag houses. And right now, there's some red tag houses that have been posted by code enforcement, and they've been called on, and there's still people in there. So I went and talked to a couple of deputies, and they told me that on daytime, they can be in there, but they can't be in there at nighttime. So my idea on a positive attitude is when that red tag goes on a house, it says nobody in the house at any time. Because what's happening right now, we have a house in Lucerne, and they're in there living. They were in there last night. They have stereo in there. I'm pretty sure they have water because there's electrical. They put plastic all around the house, around the building, and the neighbors are trying to help code enforcement, and we're trying to help the law enforcement. But they come by and the people are in there, look at us, and they just kind of laugh at us during the daytime and walk into the house. And then when we do call at night, the deputies are busy doing something else, and they can't really respond to that house. So in closing, my idea is when somebody puts in a complaint against a red house, if that person would donate some plywood and put it up on the door right away, and then if somebody wants to go back in there and clean it up, they would have a different permit allowing that person with the people's name on it. Then we could keep track of the red tag houses, because it's a nuisance, the way it's working right now. Code enforcement is doing a great job. Deputies are doing a great job, but these people are playing the system, and it just really needs to be taken care of. We're trying to make the North Shore and Lake County a safer place to live, and these people are just taking advantage of the system. So that's my idea about red tag houses. And I wish you guys could take a look at it and maybe put that on there, on that red tag saying, you can't be in here at any time. And then have another tag saying, if you're gonna clean it up or rebuild it, be like a building permit when you build a garage. I had one when I built my garage. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to respond to that.
We don't respond to
No,
public
but
input.
respond to the board. Do we have consensus to maybe bring that at a later agenda to discuss red tags and our process?
I think, yeah, if you want to add that to agenda, that's something we can talk about, and we can get that agendized at a later date for
I'd
sure.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Just as a point of information, you don't actually need consensus by local ordinance. Any board, any supervisor could put any item on.
Excellent, thank you, Anita. Okay, moving right along, I see Supervisor Brown is out of the room at this point. Can we go ahead and go to 6.3, consideration of a resolution authorizing Public Services Director to sign a notice of completion of 3 SB1 rehabilitation improvement projects, bid number 1910, item 6.3. When he comes back, we'll just jump to that. We should still be on track here.
Good morning, Board. Scott DeLeon, Public Works Director. I try to do these when we do notice of completions, and this one is especially important because it's our first SB1 project. As you know, SB1 was passed a few years ago. It was rather controversial, a raised gas tax, and we are getting some money from that. And this project here is an example of something that we probably would not have been able to do without SB1. In fact, I can tell you that we would not have done this project without SB1. We put a project together for last summer. It tackled 3 areas here in Lakeport where we have large volume of traffic. They're areas that we maintain, and what I wanted to do just very briefly is give you a quick summary of the project. We tackled 2 intersections and then a short section of Soda Bay Road just outside of Lakeport, where, as you can see, the pavement is in very poor condition. This is the portion of what's considered Scotts Valley Road under the Highway 29 overpass. That's a picture of the conditions prior to the project. Johanna, can you, thank you. And the project consisted of a reclamation or a grinding of the existing pavement and then placement of new asphalt. So that's a picture after the striping and everything was completed. There's a close-up of right at the on-ramp, and as you can see, that area is in pretty bad shape. And post-construction, another picture of the same intersection,
and post-construction. This is the South Main Street, Soda Bay Road, Highway 175 intersection. This intersection receives about 10,000 cars a day, so it's one of the higher traveled areas in the county. And you'll see here in the next picture, I think is, I mean, that's in pretty bad shape. Post-construction. This is going up to the state intersection. That pavement's failed and it was in poor condition. And post-construction, and then finally, there's one more there of the intersection. This is the section of Soda Bay Road just east of the transfer station. It's between the bridge over Manning Creek and the intersection of Big Valley. Post-construction, same construction technique, grind and then fill. It's called mill and fill in the industry. You can see, again, just really poor conditions. And that's at the intersection of Big Valley. This project was nearly $500,000 project. Part of the reason why it was so expensive, it was nighttime construction, and we chose that because of the volume of traffic that use these segments of roadway. And so we chose to, in lieu of the significant impacts it would have on the traveling public, to do it during the daytime, we did it at night. And so that increased the cost of the project, and asphalt's expensive. So again, a project we probably would not have done without SB1. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything. What we're asking the board to do is to approve the resolution allowing me to sign the notice of completion for the project.
Excellent. Supervisor Sabatier.
Thank you. Thank you for the pictures. Thank you for the review of the work that was done through the SB1. I know that this is important to me, that we show off what SB1 is doing, because I know it was controversial in having to pay extra gas taxes, and to show the results of it, I think, is important to make sure the public's aware of how it's being used and managed. And I just want to say that a lot of times we do some restriping, but unless you resurface, the restriping sometimes just doesn't show off enough, and the striping is so important for the safety of vehicles, pedestrians, and everyone that's utilizing the roadways. So just the overall brand-new roads like that is what we need more of. So thank you.
Just like to echo that, yes, I think we definitely need to be highlighting the funds that we're spending with SB1, because it was very controversial, and I appreciate and thank you for doing this work.
No other comments? Yeah, I'll follow online, excellent work. Did you add any signage up that this was an SBA1 project out there as people were driving by? Because I know a lot of folks do watch us today, but.
Absolutely. There were signage at all of the sites at either end that highlighted that the project was being funded through SB1.
Excellent. And you use the term mill and fill. What is that term?
So that's a technique that can only be used on roads that have a fairly thick section of asphalt. And what it involves is the milling of the top 2 or 3 inches of asphalt, and then filling replacement of that material that's been removed with new asphalt. And again, it can only be used in certain locations where you don't have significant base failures or issues with your subgrade. If it's just old pavement that's just weathered and falling apart, then you can use that technique. And
Excellent.
Again, it's cheaper than a complete total rebuild, but it's more expensive than a chip seal or something that we can use on pavement that's in better condition.
Thank you very much for that explanation, because that's what I wanted to get to, was the cheaper part of that, an opportunity for you to do more work in that manner. So Scott, excellent work. Thank you very much. Okay. Any public input on this issue? Seeing no public input, bring it back to the board for action.
I'll offer the resolution.
Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
And Supervisor Thomas?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along, we'll go back to item 6.2, our 906 item, presentation of a proclamation recognizing the retirement of Denise Roseanne Dukas and Health Program Support Specialist 2, and honoring her many years of outstanding service to the County of Lake. Dukas. Is it Dukas? And if I mess that name up, please correct me. All right, thank you.
Well, it's my honor on behalf of the Board of Supervisors to offer this proclamation for a huge milestone. This is a big deal for you, it's a big deal for us. So, that's for sure. This proclamation recognizing the retirement of Denise Roseanne Dukas, Health Program Support Specialist 2. and honoring
Supervisor
her for
Brown,
many years.
the mic is not picking you up. Thank you.
All right, how about that? Is that better? Yeah, okay. Whereas Denise Dukas has been a valuable and respected member of the Health Services Department since February 5th, 2002, when she was initially hired as Office Assistant 2. And whereas in 2006, Denise was promoted to Office Assistant 3, and in 2007, she was promoted to Office Services Supervisor, OSS, where she effectively supervised departmental personnel who staffed front office reception, served the public, and supported clinical services during routine and emergent conditions in 2 Lake County locations. In 2017, after serving as an OSS for 10 years, Denise was promoted to Health Program Support Specialist 1 for California Children's Services, where she served Lake County's children with special health care needs and assisted their parents and guardians in accessing all programmatic, I just washed my mouth and I can't do a thing with it. Services for which they were eligible. In 2018, she was promoted to HPSS 2, whereas Denise was integral to the Health Department's conversion to electronic medical records, assisting and training staff on how to utilize and navigate the system, and diligently supervising the conversion of paper medical records into electronic medical records over a period of approximately 2 years. And whereas Denise Dukas also possesses the distinction of earning and maintaining an amateur radio license with call sign KK6 DHP. Whereas Denise Dukas also possesses the distinction, I already read that one. Denise's depth of departmental knowledge has been a source of reliable and accurate information which assisted employees of all levels in performing their respective duties, and in so doing served the public with utmost integrity and quality. And whereas Denise's human kindness, dedication to professional conduct, confectionery talents, and overall team spirit contributed to promoting and maintaining employee morale. Whereas Denise Dukas' sincere attitude and dedication have served as an excellent example to those employees she supervised and administrators she served over the years, staff of the Lake County Health Services Department applaud Denise's many contributions, expertise, compassion, and generosity. She will be greatly missed.
Flash against trash. Nothing to say. Out of here. Thank you, Supervisor Brown. Okay, moving along with the agenda, item 7.2, consideration of a resolution amending resolution number 2019-126 and amend the FY 2019-20 adopted budget by adjusting reserves, fund balance carryover, revenues and appropriations, and B, resolution amending resolution 2019-127 to amend the position allocations for FY 2019-20 to confirm the mid-year budget adjustments. Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to start in presenting the mid-year budget adjustments by thanking Stephen Carter and Sarah Schukart, who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to put this together and bring it to your board today. And then also, the majority of your department heads are in the audience. We certainly couldn't do this without them, and appreciate all the teamwork in getting this done. And they're also here to answer any questions you have about some of the changes to their department's budgets. Obviously, the mid-year budget resolutions that you have before you today enable us to continue to carry out business for the remainder of the fiscal year. We're doing it a little bit later than usual this time. We had planned to do it a couple weeks ago, but would have not had all 5 of your board members present for that discussion, so we thought it better to wait and do it on a day when you're all here. So the attachment to the budget lists some of the highlights, and those are fairly self-explanatory. I just wanted to add a few notes. Under the revenues, we didn't include a specific highlight related to some revenue adjustments that the Public Services Director wanted to be sure to call to your attention. So that is Budget Unit 7011. For Parks and Rec, there are some additional revenues, $2,208 as a refund from First American Title for the Mount Konocti BLM land sale, $40,512 for bat remediation reimbursement from Alliant, and then a $20,000 donation from Home State Gold Mine Barrick for the Mount Konocti Trail development. So those are some additional highlights to revenues. In appropriations, you may have noticed that there are a couple of departments that are being proactive and preparing in advance for what they hope will become implementation of the class and comp study, which hasn't been finalized yet. But if that study takes effect with the July 1 payroll, as has been the hope, those departments are planning for the increased payroll costs that they would have, because the payroll that is payable on July 1 includes time worked in this fiscal year. There is a correction under appropriations, which is on page 2, Budget Unit 1671, Buildings and Grounds. In the second line, it refers to the Gibson Library. That should say Gibson Museum. So please correct that if you would. At the direction of your board, looking at now at Budget Unit 1781 and Budget Unit 2601, Ag. At the direction of your board, we're prepared to transfer the $90,000, which we had previously allocated in Budget Unit 71 for the Potter Valley Ad Hoc Committee, which we were not allowed to join. We could move that to Budget Unit 2601 if your board wants us to. When you talked about mid-year budget the last time, well, actually, let me correct myself. You talked about another matter last time and directed us to look for a potential funding source for a position in ag to help with hemp inspections. We still need to have conversations with the ag director about what that position would actually be. My understanding is he wants a different kind of classification for that, so we need to sort out what that position would be called and what pay would be appropriate for it, and we could bring that back to you with separate action documents for a future agenda. Another of the appropriations highlights, which you would see on the detail sheet, the one that looks like this but is not included in the narrative portion, is it shows in Budget Unit 1012. We are funding the CSAC leadership training, which started just a couple of months ago with many of our staff going to the training that is being co-hosted by Lake and Mendocino counties. This is the first year of what we hope will be 2 years of leadership training for our top staff. And so you'll see that appropriation in the 1012 budget unit, but the departments who have staff attending that will each reimburse.
But it's not on here?
It is.
It's not in the highlights, but it's on here,
It's
so.
like $29,000.
I don't have an on here, I just have it on here, so I have to scroll through each one of them, I guess, to find
Okay.
it. But
It's at the very top for
of which one, there's
appropriations.
3 different.
The appropriations, right at the very top, 29,000.
The middle one.
Yeah, see, I only have the 4 here, hold on. Let me find it. This one?
Would you like to borrow my paper one?
This one? This is why hard copies are my preference here. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
I
Also,
lose a lot of screens by writing on them, so that's why
you need one of those.
Don't use permanent
I
marker.
get hard copy.
So now we're looking at this more technical version, not the narrative version. Under revenues, you'll also note that for Budget Unit 2011, it shows the general wildfire relief funding that we got after the approval of the budget for the fiscal year. We, as your board recalls, we got.
Okay, where are you now?
I'm under revenue on this sheet. Budget, what did I say?
What page?
It's on page 3.
Budget Unit 1120.
Page 3 out of 6.
Page 3, top of the revenue list. You'll see the $4 million revenue coming in, which is the general wildfire relief funds that we got after you had approved the budget at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Wait till you're done.
And the recommendation with those funds is to put $2 million into reserve
Page 3.
and put $2 million into the disaster budget as protection from any future audit disallowance, if there is one, from all the FEMA claiming we have done through all the disasters. Although we're not anticipating one, we recommend putting that money there and waiting a couple years. And another thing that you'll see in that same area, revenues, it's a little further down, you'll see the PSPS allocation that the county received from Cal OES. That also came in after the budget was approved at the beginning of the fiscal year. We've received $366,786 for PSPS-related expenses. These funds cannot be used retroactively to go back and reimburse for the generators and expenses that were incurred before the allocation came, but they can be used for generator expenses after the allocation came. And so I don't believe those funds are specifically appropriated yet, correct?
The 30,000 is for the DRC.
Okay, so the DRC needs a generator at a cost of 30,000, so that one is appropriated,
The rest is not.
and the rest is not. Okay, so you can give us some direction about how you want to spend those PSPS funds. And I think that completes my highlights or points I wanted to call out. Do you want to note more?
Looking through my notes, no, she covered pretty much the ones I had highlighted.
Supervisor Sabatier.
So I have a couple questions. One, I wanted to talk about looking at an additional position to help out with the tax auction. Is it possible to maybe delay the voting on this and blend that conversation in with the tax auction conversation we will be having later? Or does it have to happen now where we're going to kind of get it convoluted between two agenda items?
It can be delayed to later.
Okay.
But you might want to, if you have questions of the department heads, you might want to
And
address those first.
basically, just to put it out there, I think that we should have one more position. I'll just stop at that and go more in details later on as I detail what's going on with the current tax auction and things like that. The other thing was the position that's being offered for the ag department. Is this something that right now it looks like it would pay for 1 year's worth? Is this something that we're looking at continuously to use? Because hemp, I don't think, is going to go away. This was one of the reasons that we brought it to the board to ask to see if we can add a position to do all the inspections and everything that needs to tackle the issues with hemp. I want to make sure that this is not a 1 year and that this is continuous.
At this point, we've only identified the 1 year, where we're guessing it would be approximately 1 year. We don't know what level the position would be paid at until we have further conversations with the ag commissioner. But 90,000 would be adequate, certainly to pay for a full year of most county positions.
Okay.
It's a
I'd
good
like to add to
question.
that when you get a chance. So.
And I think that I'm okay with the 1 year, but I want to make sure that within 6 months or so that we have another conversation to maybe at one point we need to review the fees to make sure that ag is getting the right amount of fees from those obtaining a hemp license, something along those lines. I just want to make sure that this is a long term and not just a short term where we're able to do the job 1 year and then we see a drop off in the following years. I think it's important to have that stability. The other part for the $366,000 for the PSPS resiliency, or $330,000 that are left over, I'd love to have a deeper conversation, but one of the ideas that I have, and I don't know what the cost is, so we'd have to figure out what the cost would be. But I am looking for helping out our businesses that have food that gets wasted. And if we had a mobile unit with a generator on it, that we can lease it for a nominal fee. That way we're not giving away public funds and gifting it to a private entity. They can pay us for the use of it, but we can connect their refrigeration directly to our mobile unit and get their refrigerators to go back to normal, and then we move on to the next place. That way we don't see the loss of food that we've been seeing in our businesses, which is really going to have lasting effects if more of these PSPSs happen like they did last year. I know that we have a lot of conversations in the past week at least with PG&E and what they're planning to do, but I'm just going in this that PG&E is not going to perform at the rate that I would like them to perform, and that we need to do what we need to do. So that's my opinion of how I would like to see that money spent, because I think it would be money well spent.
Supervisor Brown?
Are we going to have that on the agenda at some point to talk about? Because it's kind of, I mean, it's a lofty idea, but I think there's some logistics that might make it a little bit difficult given our budget situation right now. So there may be some challenges.
I would love to have a further conversation
Yeah.
to bring it back, but
Yeah.
that's where I would like to see that money go. Because I don't have any
Okay.
prices or anything like that
So
to tell you.
it was kind of bouncing around a little bit. Which source are you talking about?
It's on at the bottom of page 2.
These pages aren't marked here. They're only marked online, so.
So
That one's
it's,
page 1.
This one?
That one.
This one?
So it's an allocation we received from Cal OES for PSPS-related
tell me where it is.
expense.
Okay.
It's $366,000 one-time money.
Tell me the budget unit.
110, 1920. It's easier to find it. It's above 2 million. 2 million kind of stands out.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, because okay, maybe we should just bring that back and have a conversation about what to do with all of that money, because there's,
It's meant for PSPS. Let's.
I get that, but the logistics of driving around in a refrigerated truck sounds really easy, but it's not. And you got cross-contamination, there's a lot of issues related to food services that we probably should stay out of.
I never said refrigerator truck. I said a mobile generator.
Okay,
That they
well-
can plug their refrigerators to the generator.
Oh, I thought you said a mobile.
I don't want to deal with food. That's up to the business
Okay.
to deal with food.
Yeah,
I
and
just
they can
want to.
also, deal with the generators, so.
Well.
So.
So Supervisors, another potential use for that funding, the Health Department had made known a need for funding for medical equipment for the CRCs in PSPS. At this point, we've encouraged them to press PG&E to cover those costs. I don't know if that's feasible, but certainly a full conversation about how to spend those funds with the needs of all departments, I think would be really helpful.
The other question I had was, conversation I want to include is about the 1781, the hemp. I don't mind transferring some funds from whatever source, the Potter Valley project or whatever, to that, but I don't expect that we're going, I guess to put it simply, the hemp growers should pay for the hemp growers, the inspections. So I don't mind putting that money up front for the ag commissioner, but if we're doing inspections for any ag operation, they should be paying for the inspectors. So we would expect them to be reimbursed, those funds to be reimbursed back. So that's what, I'd like to see that included in there in that conversation.
And that should be addressed in when we do the annual update of our fees in May.
Right.
So I'll make sure when I talk to them.
Yeah, because it implies that we're gonna fund it, and this is how we're gonna do it, and this is how we're gonna do it until that money runs out. That's not really good practice there. Then the other, there's several of them that I want to talk about, but what's the 1671 A1 janitorial lawsuit reimbursement, $76? Is that accurate? Is that a?
Lars is here, isn't he?
Are you unhappy about the
No,
76?
I just want to make sure there's not supposed to be like 7 zeros behind it that were missed or something, yeah.
I don't have a whole lot of details about it, other than it was revenue that came in. in from an old lawsuit that predates me. And I can follow up.
No,
with
that's
you.
fine. That's an accurate
But
number,
it's-
though?
No, yeah, it is accurate. So
Okay.
that might be why I don't have a whole lot of information.
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay, no, that's fine. I don't expect that you would have.
But it's not missing digits.
No, that's what I was more concerned with, because it was like $76. Okay, so then the other one is 1918, the geothermal resource, transferring $30,000 to Vet Tech. So are we stretching what we're able to use the geothermal resource money for? Because it's supposed to be used for impacts from geothermal. That's the,
Some state and federal can be used for related to
Okay.
exactly geothermal.
okay, because in years past, we'd been pretty strict on that. And in fact, when we did the Middletown Library, there was some talk that that may be a stretch, but it was impacting the area that's impacted by geothermal. So that's why we did it. So I want to make sure that we're,
I can look into it further, but we've been transferring 75 grand for quite a few years.
we use it for Sheriff's Department, we use
No, I
it
mean
for,
specifically for the vet
okay.
clinic.
So does that mean it's
I will
okay?
have to look into to make sure.
All right, thank you. And
Okay. Can I follow up on that real quick? Can you give us a code
up
for
to
that?
1918.
Yeah.
No, like a legal code as to how we're supposed to
yeah.
use that money.
Yeah, I think it's written in AB 1905. Yeah,
Yeah, 1905.
is the legislation for it, yeah.
I've got information on it, I can send it to your board.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there are some broad, generalized uses of that. Yeah, there's some language that allows for some things, but I just want to make sure that happens to be one of them, because there are a lot of things, specific to Middletown and Cobb that,
And Anderson Springs.
yeah, well, that whole area.
Yeah.
That whole, the whole, there's two areas that have area plans, and that's Cobb and Middletown. And the geothermal impacts are obvious up there, so. I'll keep looking through this, so there were a couple other things, but that's all I had for right now.
All right, okay, no questions at this point. Anybody, any public input on this item?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the gentleman that
Yes.
had, was interested in code enforcement, and we
Yes.
didn't touch on.
No, this is 7.3 is what he's talking about. Consideration
Okay.
of
No, I don't
allowable
think it's tax
uses of
revenue?
cannabis money.
I don't think so. I think this goes here for allocation of positions.
Oh, okay, because
Or I think it
he wanted to
covers
use the cannabis money for it, and that's the discussion for 7.3.
No, he
I
was
didn't
just
hear him
talking
say
directly.
cannabis.
General.
He was just talking directly code enforcement.
Well, he said weed and marijuana, and I assumed that that's what it was about,
Oh.
so,
Those were the
That's
code
what he-
violations,
Yeah.
not the money.
okay.
Come on up to the front.
Yes, what it is
Can you restate your name one more time?
Charles Bean, Behne. And what it is right now, code enforcement has 3 officers. In the past, they've only had 1. For an example, we have a property in our area that in the last 5 years, we could never get code enforcement out there because they prioritize things, and this property has truckloads, pickup loads of household trash sitting out front along the side, several cars along the road, and twice I talked to the other code enforcement officer, and she said that there was just her, and everything was prioritized, and so in 5 years, we never got it taken care of. A month and a half ago, I talked to Andy, the new head of the department, and now has 3 officers, and then told him of this problem, and in a week, he got it cleaned up after 5 years. And, but January 1st, he says there will only be back to one officer for the entire county, because the priority is the weed and the marijuana abatement. That's where his other 2 officers will be involved in. So we're just afraid that it's gonna fall right back into properties not getting cleaned up. In the last month, Nice and Lucerne alone, he's done 30 code enforcements, and 85% of them have been brought into compliance, which is what we want. And we're just afraid that as of June 1st, he's going to lose his 2 officers and there'll just be 1 left for the entire county. And we're afraid it'll go back. And we'd just like to, if you can find some money to just hire at least 1 more officer through the abatement period, which starts on June 1st. And we're hoping that you can do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if we could speak to that for a moment, so go ahead, Stephen.
Well, there is one thing that I wanted to say. In your mid-year, there is 200,000 additional funds going for abatements.
I saw that.
Not specifically for officers, but for abatements of properties. And the way that fund works is if it runs low, general fund replenishes, even though eventually it should come back from the owner of the property.
I'd like to have, Scott, how many positions do we currently have allocated for code enforcement? If you come up and,
I have that handy, Scott, if you will.
I believe it's 4.
4, right?
I believe it's 4. We have 3 currently, and we just opened a recruitment for a 4th.
Okay, excellent.
And
I just wanted you to report on that.
The department hasn't made policy decisions around pulling officers off of regular abatements to focus only on cannabis or something like that.
So I haven't been involved with any discussions of like that. So I would say no. I think it's up to, I think it's up for discussion, but we are advertising for a 4th position.
Excellent. And that's why I wanted, because there was 1 more position. So Scott, thank you very much.
And I believe your name is Mr. Bean, is that correct? Just wanted to make sure, because you were outside, that you heard that there is 1 more position that is allocated, and they are looking to hire 1 other officer right now currently, because they are allocated 4 positions and only 3 are filled. So at this moment in time, it looks like what you're requesting is already in the works.
Excellent.
All of us over there will be happy.
Right. And just checking with the board, I don't think we gave a specific order or motion as to what the priorities of the department were. I felt it was more of a discussion. Am I correct on that? Or did we actually provide direction that those were meant to be priorities, the weed abatement and cannabis?
Definitely on the weed abatement, for sure.
Right,
That was the
right.
concern. The Rivieras, Buckingham, all through that area. We
Yeah, but we
wanted
didn't-
them to be started. We didn't go into cannabis
We didn't budget
as
for
far
that, though.
allocation or
Yeah, we
anything.
didn't, that money's already generated by themselves. They
Yeah.
don't, there's no money required in our budget for that.
I think the discussion was that the weed abatement would be happening now.
Yes.
And then we would transfer over, looking at cannabis, when we wouldn't want people out trying to do
Right.
weed abatement in the summertime.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But at no point were there, hey, we're going to take 2 officers and this is what we're going to do. It
No.
was, these things need to happen all at once, so it'll be allocated as time is, available. Supervisor Brown.
Carol, maybe you could point, if it's on here. So I know it's premature to talk about the specifics of the changes of where buildings are, like the sheriff's department. And, we're having that discussion, and I don't want to go into it because I know that there's some things that are premature. But I want to make sure that we have money budgeted for that in the event that it comes through, because I think it's going to be an important move. Once one moves and the other one moves and another one moves, and it's a cost, but it's ultimately should be better for efficiency, so.
So I know the sheriff certainly has that in mind, and basically what you're asking me about is the project that we've been meeting with Senator McGuire and the city of Clear Lake and the State Department of General Services and the military department of the state about the possibility of swapping the property, the 15-acre parcel the county owns in Clear Lake on 18th Avenue, swapping that parcel for the armory. And if we're successful with that swap, then the sheriff's headquarters would move to the armory, and the property that we've given up in Clear Lake would be developed by the state for a housing project and possibly an economic development piece to it as well, all tied to the governor's focus on housing. The governor had an executive order that was really focused on converting state properties that are no longer in use for some sort of housing purpose. And since the Armory is no longer in use, this idea was hatched around swapping the two to make this possible. And I
That
know-
wasn't really the budget concerns that I have. The cost of remodeling always is sometimes even more than a new building, you know, in some,
Absolutely.
depending upon what you're gonna be, because you gotta
And-
tear stuff out and put new back in. So I just wanna make sure that we're budgeting it. I like the idea. I think it's a great idea. But then if they move, then somebody else is gonna move into there, which is gonna cause more remodeling. So there's a whole ripple effect of this that we need to make sure is in here.
And certainly it would need to be for next fiscal year. We should have a sense of whether or not it's going through here in the, I think in the next couple of months. I had a conference call with McGuire and others yesterday. And what the state intends to do is put out a RFI, request for interest, in the 18th Avenue project to see if there are developers that would, you know, be takers if it's actually offered. And if they're successful with that RFA, then they will want to move forward with next steps in the swap.
And the next fiscal year is 4 months away.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Now, the sheriff,
and this-
I know,
and
has-
this, actually, this mid-year budget, it leads us to that next part of the budget.
It
It's
sure
not
does.
necessarily adjusting and fixing everything from last year, as it's supposed to, but it also anticipates what we're gonna be doing for next year. So that's why we need to have some consideration in that.
So I don't know if the sheriff wants to speak to it today, but we've had some conversations about what the Armory will need if we're able to secure it. Do you want to speak to that today or too soon? Thanks.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Okay.
Okay. I had a couple of concerns here. Let's go back to budget highlights, budget unit, building and safety. Just one of the, in the narrative here, budget unit 260, building safety reserves to decrease 200,000 potential new contracts through the fiscal year that might affect the Gwinnett Valley project. That stands out as an opportunity that may be coming down the pipe that could be very beneficial to the entire county. And it's just concerning to see that written in there like that.
Putting money out there where it can be spent. Yeah.
This is on the
Highlights.
What's the number?
the highlight, budget highlights and narrative,
What's the budget unit?
2602. This talks about decreases and other things like that, and I understand they're written through those processes, so.
Thank you.
Chairman Simon, as I understand it, due to the size of that proposed project, we are interested in hiring some consultants to come in and assist staff with the review of the plans, the construction plans, and other components of that project. And so the funds that you're seeing are targeted for paying for consultants to help assist in the review of the plans for the project.
It just didn't read whether it affected negatively or positively. It just says may affect the Gwinnett Valley project. So that was my clarification there.
Without the staff, additional resources provided by a consultant, I would surmise that the effect would be negative.
Okay.
Because this is, as you know, a very large project, and we're going to need some help in reviewing the plans for its construction. They have a very fast timeline. They want to get moving, and so we want to help facilitate that and get those plans reviewed as quickly as possible.
All right, thank you, Scott. Thank you for that information. The other budget unit would be Budget Unit 1120. As far as the general wildfire relief 2019-20, there is a document that we have, the Lake County Community Wild Protection Plan, that needs to be updated. We're kind of it's a really good document that the county needs to get updated. I think it's about $50,000 is what was allocated back in 2009 when it was done. I would like to see if we could have a conversation about getting the funds for the Risk Reduction Authority to update or work with the community or Lake County Fire Protection District or Fire Safe Council, whichever one, I'm still researching what that is, but that document would allow and open up some real grant opportunities, which we've been looking at for all the Firewise communities, everybody through Lake County. It's not a big amount, but it's a very powerful document when it comes to grant funding and other things. It was done in 2009, some great information and detail and data in there, but it needs to be able to be updated every 5 years, and it hasn't been updated, since 2000. So I think it's a real opportunity, if we could get that done, to get the allocated money to update that plan.
So that plan, I think, was grant funded, so I think the update could be grant funded, and we could probably provide a match for that. That might be a way to.
Either way, we
Yeah.
can continue the conversation, but it
Yeah.
definitely is something we need to, I am researching how that goes. Obviously, the risk reduction is a new JPA that we set up as the county, and we'd like to see how that is. So anyway, bring that up now as a concern that if there's an opportunity, we should look at that right now.
I had one other question, if I could.
Go ahead, Supervisor Brown.
Jan, this is about the lighting in Kelseyville, because we talked about it, and at some point, do you have any plans for that? Because we gotta be running really close to running out of money for that.
We are, and there are 3 top priority rate increases, 218 rate increases, and that is one of them that you'll probably be seeing in the next 6 months. Jesse and I will be working on those. Kelseyville, Middletown Sewer, and what was it, Clear Lake Oaks and Clear Lake Keys Lighting District, which we're going to merge and get a 218 through that.
And basically, well, as far as the Kelseyville Lighting District, there really isn't one, other than there are streetlights that we've been paying for out of funds that were available left over from reserves from years ago. And at some point, those reserves are gonna be gone, and so it's gotta be identified to where those that receive the benefit have to pay the bill. And it's either gonna be businesses or spread out through the community, but it's gotta go to a vote, correct?
Correct, yeah,
Yeah.
it will go
And-
to vote.
and
And we may
ultimately-
look at expanding it. We found that
Right.
streetlights do reduce, they are good for public safety, and I want to talk to the community and see if they're in favor of expanding the boundaries and picking up more parcels.
Yeah, was your plan to do that this year?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Probably the next
We'll
6
talk about
months.
that. I just wanna make sure it's included in the conversation, because we can't afford to take, once the reserves are depleted, we can't, take money from someplace else and put it in there.
Yeah.
We just can't, so.
Correct.
We need to have that conversation, thanks.
Any more go ahead, Bruce.
It's just a quick comment, because I see there, and it was already mentioned by Carol Hutchinson about the $30,000 that is used for the CSAC training. I think that's money well spent to make sure that our staff gets the training and the continued education that they need to always strive to do better. But I would like to see a return on that investment as well, which is that the staff who goes to those CSAC developments come back and do the same type of class here locally, so that it helps us with our succession plan. So just putting that bug in your ear, because I think that would be a really good way for our staff to train staff because of the training that they've obtained going to these CSAC trainings. I just think it would be a great trickle-down effect to prepare our next successive staff. Other than that, that's it.
Okay.
So it sounds
Go
like
ahead,
the
Carol.
board wants to have the cannabis.
Wants to have the cannabis discussion and then come back and approve this? Is that, am I understanding?
After the tax collector item, because it kind of blends together with allocation of positions and the tax auction, I just don't want to finish one item when I'm going to be bringing back up some of those pieces of information.
And that was a request from Supervisor Spalti, so, you okay with that? Rob,
Yeah,
where are you?
yeah, of course,
Okay. So we have consensus.
Do you want
Rob.
all your department heads to stay for all that time?
Unless they think that they wanna, if now's their chance, and while they're here, they probably wanna get back to work, but.
My plan wasn't to change anything because they left.
Yeah, no, I don't, yeah, if we do bring anything up regarding them, we can always ask them to come down.
Come back, yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody wish to speak? I mean, just, can't wait.
Any more public input or anything from the audience on these issues, any of the department heads? Okay, bring back to the board. So at this time, we will move on from item 7.2 and come back at a later time?
So you want to take up 7.6 next? Is that the request, or?
Or 7.3.
Yeah, we just go to 7.3.
7.3?
Either way.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and move on with item 7.3, a
Thank you.
consideration report on cannabis tax revenue collected, future projections for this revenue stream, and B, consideration of report on allowable uses of cannabis monies. Thank you, department heads. Thank you for coming down today.
Yes, please. Thank you, Patrick.
Sure, yeah, you can go ahead and put that up.
So Patrick is going to do the first portion of this item where he's going to review the cannabis tax revenue collected to date and give you some projections for how we anticipate this revenue stream will continue.
So good morning, Patrick Sullivan, Tax Administrator. I'm going to provide sort of a brief update on first the funds that we've received so far through the cannabis cultivation tax. To date, we have received approximately $1,279,853. Sort of an important note in this is that because last year, well, earlier this year, we changed the billing cycle, it did change the way that the money flows in. So fiscal year 19-20 was artificially low due to that change in the billing cycle. If this change had not occurred, the revenue, it appears, probably would have tipped just over $1 million. Instead, we ended up with $486,000. And that's because now, again, we are billing going backward. Instead of having people pay in advance, we're having them pay after they have begun cultivating. Comprehensive data is not yet available on how many permits will be active and what their square footage will be next year, which makes projections a little difficult. CDD was very helpful and was able to provide me with sort of a rough status of where they stand for now, and that's how we were able to build this current projection. An important note is that the tax base in this, because it is a new program, is still expanding. There are still a lot of permits in the pipeline. From what I could tell looking at the CDD data, there's about as many permits out there at some stage in the process as there are currently active. So as those permits continue to come in, the tax base should continue to grow sort of for the foreseeable future. That brings me to what we see coming through. Based off the available data, sort of a snapshot in time of what's active right now with CDD, there's a potential revenue of $2.3 million. But the important caveat here is that that would be assuming full compliance and that everyone with those permits is actually going to engage in cultivation. So if we could flip to the next slide, I can sort of run down the possible factors that could.
Can you make that any bigger? Or like zoom in on anything? No.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, I can read out some of these numbers if they're on the smaller side.
I can, but I'm not sure everyone can.
I won't. I'm not good with the pointer. I'll pass. So there's not local historical data for this program yet, obviously, because it's so new. So in looking at the factors that could impact the revenue, first we looked at non-cultivation. We did alter our structure here to allow cultivators to declare non-operation, that they aren't going to cultivate in a given year. Currently, you'd have until June 1st to make that determination and file the appropriate paperwork. So we don't have an idea yet of what's out there. But what would be important to note is that last year, there was essentially a 27% reduction of what the revenue would have been based off non-cultivation. Those were people that did not cultivate, and looking forward in this year, if they were to declare the same, they would meet that criteria. So that's an idea. So that would have dropped that 2.3 million if we shared that same percentage by $621,000. So that would have brought it down to closer to 1.7 million. The other thing I noted were just some common delinquency rates that are out there. For instance, sales tax has generally about a 13% delinquency when you look across the country. Federal income tax is 16%. It's difficult to get numbers on cannabis, especially because there are so many different program types. The highest hard figure I saw was a 28% delinquency. We so far have not had any real delinquencies here. We've had some late payment issues, so no one's been in touch with us about any issues, and to my knowledge with the tax collector's office, so I don't anticipate a problem. But if you were to look at some of these, a 13% delinquency in sales tax would drop, would result in a reduction of about $300,000. A rate more akin to income tax would drop it by $377,000. So that would bring us down more into the $1.3 million range. An interesting note in terms of here at the local level, when we looked at TOT delinquency and just grabbed a more recent quarter, there was a 13.5% delinquency rate, which was sort of more akin to sales tax. So that, I mean, while not determinative, might be kind of a guiding factor in what to expect in the future. But since this program is so new, these businesses are all new, so far we're still cruising along without any actual delinquency. So when you look at these factors, you could see up to 2.3 million, assuming there's some non-operation comparable to last year, 1.7. If there were some delinquencies, somewhere between 1.3 and 1.7 million might be a realistic range of what's going to come in. But there are still program changes with the state framework, water, weather, market conditions. It's really hard to project going forward when we don't have all the data yet. CDD will be providing a list at the end of June with all the more hard data on the active permits that are going to be subject to billing. And at that time, we'd have a much better idea of what's going to be out there. And I'm happy to take any questions if the board has them.
What's,
Go ahead, Supervisor Brown.
what's the bottom line that we have available right now?
So that would be the 1,279,000.
Johanna,
So
can you go back
close
to
to
the previous
1.3 million.
Thank you.
And that's what's
Okay,
come in
yeah.
since the inception of the
Okay,
program.
so received, that's, okay, and now, when you say, to date, that's, what would that be? Would that be a year?
That's as of when I reviewed it about 2 weeks ago.
But what was the
that's-
beginning of that?
Since,
Was it-
Since cannabis cultivation began,
Yes,
nearly
since
3
Since
years.
it began, yeah.
It's
So
3
this is
years.
all the
Nearly
revenue
3
that's come
years.
in as a result of this tax program, because we
Okay,
haven't.
so 486,000 was, what do we get in a year, basically?
So that's what I was getting at there. If-
Growing.
If last year, if we had not changed the billing cycle, we basically let people skip the second installment and pushed it into this year, we would have received a little over $1 million, it looks like. But last year, we only collected one installment, so it was 486,193.
Okay. And your definition or the reference to delinquency is those that are participating in the program legally that they haven't made the payment yet.
Yeah, that is not capturing the people that
so-
are completely
Yeah,
unregistered.
it's not, we're not counting the delinquents
Super
The true-
delinquent.
Literally,
Yeah.
that are
the
delinquent.
yeah.
No, no.
Okay. Okay.
Supervisor Sabatier.
So I noticed when going through, because I have a bit of a spreadsheet as well with all the licenses on there and their status, and I noticed, I don't know if we fixed this problem or not, but there's something that was happening, a proration based on date, and I don't think that's what Measure C was about, that if you planted in April, you would get prorated from January to April or whatever it was. To me, you're paying $1 a square foot for a season of grow, and if you're starting it in June, August, or April, you're gonna pay the same amount for that season of grow. That's the way that I read Measure C. And when I see that we've prorated in the past, I feel like we've gypped ourselves of some good, almost 50% of the money sometimes, because typically they don't start growing until around June. And so I want to make sure that we're not doing a proration unless there's something specific that you could find for me in Measure C that says we should do that. It says the taxes don't accrue, but the taxes are also $1 a square foot, not a certain number of cents per day in the year. And so I want to make sure we get our full 100% for every acre or every square foot that is grown, and not any prorated amount whatsoever. If they're harvesting and they're able to sell it, then they did a harvest, and that's $1 a square foot in my mind. So I want to make sure we're not doing that anymore, because that doesn't seem to be what we voted on when Measure C passed through.
I might want to refer to county council for a few questions on that as well.
Are we still
because
prorating?
As of now, we would prorate. If someone were to say, for instance, when you get your permit, now you're allowed to push your cultivation start date out. If you were to make that date September or August, we wouldn't be charging you for the first part of that year. We let people push that date out. So we would be allowing a proration in that sense, in that initial year. But that was tied to the fact that we weren't assessing taxes unless someone was actually engaged in cultivation. So I'm not clear whether we could charge retrospectively for.
And I'm not looking for
Yeah.
retrospective, I'm saying from now on, my view of the measure is you pay $1 a square foot, no matter what your square footage is, no matter when you grow. If you harvested and you got a season out of it, then you got your 100% of your product's worth. We want to get our 100% of our Measure C's worth, or I want to get it.
Right.
Not going to speak for the rest of the board.
So I would ask a chance to research that
Well, I think
issue just to.
the ordinance speaks for the
make
board. I mean, the ordinance is what it is. It's
Yeah.
what, you know, yeah.
But I might be misinterpreting it, so it's what I would like to see out of it, but again, it's
Yeah,
And we haven't
I
built
would like
yet.
to see what county council gets out of it. That would be more helpful, probably. And we may have to bring it back.
That would be the best way. If your board has questions about this, I'm happy to go through and review the ordinance. And also, if it's your board's desire, to speak with Patrick and look at the factual scenarios so that we can run those through and your board can see the most likely permutations and then take it up. We could do that next week if you like, or pick a day at your convenience.
I think that's a good idea, because
Yeah, I
I'm
agree.
just looking through it, and I'm seeing things, I don't disagree with you, but it does say in here, for the purposes of this chapter, taxes shall begin to accrue on the date on which a person becomes engaged in legally authorized cannabis cultivation in accordance with the provisions of the Lake County Code. So I think that's probably the interpretation that you're coming up with.
And that's a concern, and I don't have a clear answer either way.
Yeah.
I'd like to
Yeah.
hear
That's
from
what's at,
council
so-
about which.
It does specifically say that from the day they become engaged with it, so. The thing, and the other, while we're doing that, I think it's a good idea to do that, because these ordinances, not just this one, but all of them, once in a while, it's a good idea to review them, to remind ourselves exactly, just like the AB 1905, just, the purposes of it. And, there's some specific language on what this stuff this money can be used for. And I'd like a review of what we're doing with it. It's law enforcement, environmental protection, water resources, and
water quality.
water quality, not water resources, water quality, protection resources. So, and then necessary education service for children of Lake County, to educate them in regard to negative impacts of drug and alcohol use. So we have 3 areas specific. And we need to identify each year where those, because maybe we're not going to spend it all, maybe we're not going to prorate it, maybe we're not going to split it, divide it equally, but there are projects, and we certainly have them within the county, and even, the part of the children, it seems obvious to go out and solicit the county office of education or whatever, but I think within our own AODS and our behavioral health services, we might be able to cover a lot of that, and it may help with some of those expenses as well, because we have a need there. So, we need to have that conversation as well.
I would just emphasize that because we haven't actually billed yet, regardless of whatever decision is made on proration, we still have plenty of time to address that.
Right.
Because we can cover it either way and when we actually do this next billing.
Okay. So bringing it back at a later date, yeah, next week would be fine. Could we get it on next week?
March 3rd?
March 3rd?
Absolutely.
March 3rd, okay?
Yeah, no, that's great. I want to make sure we figure it out before the season starts and we do something that we know is supposed to be done.
Okay. All right. Any more questions for Patrick?
Well, I don't have any questions for Patrick. I appreciate your presentation there. The only thing is, you know, at some point, and I don't know when we would want to have that conversation, but we need to solicit the departments that are actually, this funding is available, and have them submit something. I don't want to sit up here and say, I think we need to spend it on this or that until I hear from the departments on where their need
That
is.
is affected by it.
And it's got to be, you know, a legitimate need, not just, you know, here's a good chance for some money, so let's, you know, make up a program. I think, you know, there are needs out there that we can identify readily, and I think that's what we need to do. Even if it's every year you go through this exercise, because the need may not be the same from year to year.
And in the not-too-distant past, you had asked staff to develop a mini-grant type of application process for that. We had just held off doing so while we were waiting for the funding source to stabilize. The non-op clause and the billing date shift changed things dramatically. But now I think we would be in a position to put that together. And other counties do same. We can even borrow some examples from other counties so the departments can apply for the funds.
Okay.
I have one more comment. I just want to echo what Supervisor Brown said. I think that we, holding on to money that we can spend, while many times in our conversations we say we're strapped for money, is not a good idea. I think if we have the money, we need to look at ways to make it benefit our communities. I know that we did approve the mini grant. I'm not going to persuade you to do otherwise. That was a board decision, but let's make it a minimum impact on our department heads as far as what kind, because typically grants, we always talk about the amount of paperwork that goes along with it. Let's make sure it's as minimal as possible of an impact. I know that we received a memo from, or a research findings from county council saying it's a general tax. We can use it pretty much whatever we want. However, in the way that the measure was sold, it did say what Supervisor Brown stated, and I think we need to try and stick to that as much as we can so that the trust of the voters is increased and not decreased.
Anything else from the board? Any comments from any public input on this item? Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I apologize.
Michael Green. Just to clarify, I think proration is not the appropriate term. I understand where the concern's coming from. Non-ops are what we're talking about. So if I understand right, they've been doing installment payments, so they pay half the tax up front, they pay the second half at the end of the year, or whatever it is. But if they're not actively cultivating, the tax is not due until they actually notify CDD that they're up and running. So we're not prorating anything. There are quite a number of non-ops.
There was prorations.
Then you're probably using the term differently than I would. Long story short, you have what is now kind of a baseline. It looks like we're getting $1 million per year roughly off the existing permits. When you talk about what those tax revenues can be allocated, again, we did pass it as a general purpose tax. It can be used for any purpose that this board has discretion to allocate that money for. I know there was talking points at the time that the board put forward that you would prefer to put it forward on enforcement, youth substance abuse, and some of those designated things on the wish list. But again, those were general talking points, and you are in no way bound to do that. You may have other more pressing needs that you may want to turn to this revenue stream. Fire recovery is a big issue for now. Hemp, if you don't have the horses in the budget adjustment you're going to do, you could turn to this. When we did a little mini campaign for Measure C. I chaired that. I was treasurer for that. What we emphasized in that was enforcement. And you heard a gentleman here today, he wants enforcement. So of all those talking points that were talked about when Measure C was on the ballot, enforcement was number one. So as you sit there and kind of slice and dice what you want to do on a good day, when your revenues kind of ramp up, that's excellent, you can absolutely do that. But enforcement is number one in what was in the minds of the public and what was in the minds of the board at the time you put that on. Thank you.
Hello there, Lance Williams. This was item 7.3, I assume? I stepped out, just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Thank you. So today I'd like to read a letter from the Lake County Cannabis Alliance. The board has received the letter, but the public has not heard it. And I think it's at the perfect timing here. To the Lake County Board of Supervisors, on behalf of the Lake County Cannabis Alliance and its members, we are encouraging that Lake County begin spending the, I hear now, $1.3 million in Measure C cannabis tax funds that have been collected. We would fully support the use of Measure C funds for the permitting and enforcement of cannabis and hemp cultivation activities, which is in consent with Measure C's stated purpose. Along with your newly proposed positions in the Department of Agriculture and Planning, we would advocate that the Measure C funds be used for a new and dedicated cannabis position. This position could be the liaison between planners, building officials, and the cannabis community. It is our hope that this position could become the subject matter expert regarding the local permitting process and could facilitate the consistent interpretation and applications of the regulations. We ask for your consideration as it is our belief that, together, these positions would ease the burden on current staff, creating more time for broader county projects. With greater participation through more timely implementation process, the county would generate significantly more Measure C revenue to be used at its discretion in protecting our county and its citizens. Sincerely, the Lake County Cannabis Alliance. Thank you, and again, I'm really glad this is in front of us because it looks like, as this board meeting started, money to be used. And thank you for listening. Have a good day.
So, I have a question, and I don't care who answers it. Maybe you have the answer to this, but is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor.
I don't claim to know everything about this industry or this business, but most of the grows or all the grows that we're talking about are medical, or is there recreational? Because a lot of that's changed statewide, so.
Most of it's recreational. I think there'd be a very small percentage, maybe in the 5.
Okay, and the reason I asked that, I thought that was the case, but I wasn't sure. This ordinance is for medical. It specifically says medical. In fact, it doesn't say cannabis, it says medical.
Well, I also believe that even though the retails are medical, there is no real separation at the state level from what I understand. So in other words, they are combined.
Am I reading it out of context? Okay.
Yeah, because I think it says in preparation for Prop 64 as well, it talks about the upcoming potential legalization.
Okay, that could be, but that was glaring at me, that's why I asked that, so if it's, I'm sure Anita can.
Anita, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, again, everyone started off as medical, but as this was proposed.
No, correct, that's right, and that's why it was relevant at the time that this ordinance was done, that's why I'm curious.
I think we can still use the money no matter how we look at it.
You do, but I appreciate that, but.
Anita, go ahead.
Yeah, that's who I'm really looking at.
The ordinance specifically also applies should marijuana become recreational in nature, and that's why it's transferred over, because a measure such as 64 or some other measure, this tax ordinance was originally written at a time where there was a taxation process for medical marijuana under the Business and Professions Code, and that's the track it took. But again, in light of what was obviously a future occurrence in terms of expanding the use to recreational, the ordinance contemplates that quite clearly.
Okay, and it says here 1857, in the event that the cultivation of cannabis for recreational use, this is read almost at the very end, so I should have read the whole thing. If cultivation of cannabis for recreational use is legalized or decriminalized, the provision of this chapter shall apply without subsequent voter approval, so that does cover it, okay. That had me a little nervous when I first read that, because so the, as far as using staff for planning or whatever, I mean, it doesn't say that in there, so I guess we can use it for
They would be enforcing or interpreting the law itself, so that would be a type of enforcement.
Well, I think we got a report that's coming up here, from Anita, to
I
talk
think so,
specifically what can be done with it. So, do you have any more questions for Lance?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anita, go ahead, move to, public, I apologize, I did not see you there. Go ahead.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Mary Draper. I currently have 4 cultivation permits in Kelseyville and pay over $240,000 a year. I have a project that I have proposed in Lucerne, which would start out paying another $240,000 a year. My problem is that everything I do is legal. I go with the metric and I'm state licensed, and having an extra person to explain exactly what you need to do is absolutely imperative. In Lucerne, I've been in the pipeline for quite a long time, and it's like I'm not really sure, should I make this change, should I not make the change? The planner tells me to do it, but I don't know if it's gonna hurt it. And if there was somebody that we could ask and somebody that we could talk to that wasn't taking the planner's time, I think it would be more than helpful. If I can't get my activation permit, my hearing in time to get my state license, I will not be planting in Lucerne because I have the whole line. And I have my foot so deep that I can't take a chance of doing something incorrectly. I'm the number 3 in the state of California for sales for pre-rolls, which is what the Millennium's like. So I cannot do something that is not going to work for me. And having somebody there to talk to say, yes, you can do this, no, you can't do that, is not only going to help your planners, and it's going to make the process go smoother because when they get it, it's going to be correct, but it's going to help us in knowing what we can and can't do. I'd really appreciate an extra position in that, just so that we have somebody to talk to that will help us. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I did have one other thing to go back to what Michael was talking about, the part about the hemp. I don't read in there where we can use this for hemp enforcement. And I get it, it crosses the boundary when somebody says they're growing hemp, but they're growing cannabis, but that's just an illegal grow regardless of where it is. It could be anywhere. So we don't have to say we're using it for hemp enforcement or hemp testing or anything like that. I don't see that in here that it could be used for that. It can be used for enforcement of cannabis, whether it be legal or illegal, to look at that, but I don't see where it says it can be used for hemp.
Okay.
So,
Sorry.
and I say it like that because I didn't see some other things that were in there, so.
Any more public input on this item right here, this section, Section A, the cannabis tax revenue collected? We hear the proposals that came from the floor are public here. Thank you very much for that. But what I'd like to do is bring it back to the board and then have Anita address Part B, the consideration report of allowable uses for the cannabis monies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't go through all of the information that I've provided in this brief memo, other than, again, this is very clearly and expressly by the terms of the ordinance considered to be a general tax, rather. And I just wanted to see if you were listening.
Yeah.
There is language in the ordinance that speaks to specific purposes. It does state that to raise additional revenue to help fund law enforcement, environmental protection, water quality resources in the county, as well as to establish additional education programs for county youth relating to drug and alcohol use. Section 3, however, does state that the purpose of the ordinance is to impose a general tax to establish a government funding mechanisms for those purposes described therein, but the county is not committed to any specific course of action with regard to the general revenues generated. So your board was giving, and the intent of your board is most clearly expressed by the language in the ordinance that you approved and put to the voters. And here your board was opining that the most important areas of concern to you were the impacts to law enforcement, environmental protection, water quality, and educational programs. However, as a general tax, the specific course of action your board wishes to follow with regard to these monies is yours. That could mean something totally different from those purposes, or it could mean that you look at those purposes, law enforcement, environmental protection, water quality, and education, and determine how best you want to serve those. And because those are all very general areas for support, your board could find that many areas of endeavor or uses for those monies would advance those particular provisions. Certainly, anytime you have more staff, you have better opportunity to see what's on the ground, to look at the use of resources, to look at impacts to resources. All of those things would arguably come within those purposes if your board wishes to direct your attention to them.
Okay. Thank you, Anita.
Thank you.
Supervisor Spelter.
I just kind of wanted to go back to Part A and say that there are some changes happening in community development, and I would like to not make a decision on what's needed in community development without first having a conversation with its interim director right now to figure out what changes are occurring where there may not be a need for that position, or what would that position look like, and would it truly have the benefits that we see on paper but maybe not in practicalities. So I would like that conversation to go further than just here and the now, to see what can happen.
And I think that's a follow-up on the grant conversation. What departments are affected? What do they think would be the most beneficial? Which I'm in agreement with.
And then, just to reconfirm, next week, we're having a follow-up discussion on the proration issue around the collection of the tax. Yes? Yes.
Yes.
Please.
Is there any other follow-up we might have missed?
So I'm just going to add one thing. I know that we said there's about 1.3 million. I'd like to know how much of that 1.3 we feel safe in saying we can allocate. Because I'm sure that we don't want to put all 1.3 and then all of a sudden there's some issue that comes up where we have to do a refund or whatever the case might be. I don't want us to be in that position where we're going in the red in a fund that's supposed to always be in the black. So if you can come to us with an actual balance of what is possible to allocate, that would also be great.
We have a good number to start with right there, the 486, so anyway. Okay,
Is there anything
thank you.
further?
Yeah, no action needed, that was a report, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do a 5-minute break. Okay, with a 5-minute break, we'll take a 5-minute break right now. Okay, we're going to go ahead and resume the February 25th meeting at 10:53 a.m. We're going to go ahead and go back to, at this point, our 7.2 item.
Or moving on from that.
Yeah, well, yes, 7.3. That was information and reports only on 7.3? So moving on from that, we'll go back to item 7.2.
Thanks,
Yes,
Mr.
I did say I wasn't gonna bring anything up without the department head being here, but
Now that they're gone.
there was a question that I had. So,
Is it a department head we can get back?
no, it's fine. You could probably answer this. So the 300 and some thousand dollars, maybe it's 300,000 that we're giving back to the state for behavioral health services.
No, I believe that's going back into a reserve that was pulled out to pay for the state project, but that didn't go through.
Okay. So they did the presentation here a while back. That money that they did, that money's already gone back, the
They're
411,000.
done repaying the state, so that's what's left of the pot they had set aside for that, and they're putting it back in reserves.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Is my best understanding of that.
Okay, Carol?
So, Mr. Chair, I thought it might be helpful to go back and go over the specific terms of the PSPS allocation, since there's been quite a bit of interest in that. So here is the list of things this $366,000 can be used on, and bear in mind that this letter regarding this allocation came out October 25th, 2019, so it can't be for expenses prior to that date. It has to be moving forward from that date, and the final report on the expenditure of these funds is due to the state due no later than November 30th, 2022. So basically, we have a year and a half to determine how to spend that. So the things you can spend this funding on is equipment, generators and generator connections at essential facilities with an emphasis on clean energy and clean solutions where possible, or other alternative backup power sources. generator fuel and fuel storage, and redundant emergency communications such as battery-powered radios. It can also be used for plans related to PSPS, continuity plans, development or update of contingency plans for electrical disruptions that include considerations such as protecting individuals with access and functional needs, medical baseline, and socially vulnerable populations, transportation, emergency public information, and preservation of essential functions. It can be used for risk assessments for critical infrastructure and lifelines. It can be used for post-event reports that identify lessons learned and corrective actions in managing PSPS. It can be used for public education materials or supplies focused on individual or family preparation for PSPS. And it can be used for one-time costs associated with identifying and equipping resource centers for the public to access during electrical disruptions. These funds can't be used for response costs associated with the PSPS events, including staffing or new positions or emergency operations center staffing, security, law or fire response, or overtime charges. So that's generally a sense of what it is intended to be used for. At this point, as you know, we're only earmarking the first 30,000 for the DRC generator. That is an essential one that has not been completed yet. But we also have great concerns about the generator at the jail, which is failing. And we had trouble with it in the extended period of PSPS. The sheriff, I think, has gone, but I believe there are potential safety issues given that the power is not 100% while operating on the generator power. And so if you assume that the remainder of the funds would be used for a generator at the jail, our understanding is from a preliminary bid on the cost of a generator for that building, that the remaining funds in this allocation would only cover about half of that expense. Not even half. So the preliminary bid on a new generator for the jail was, remind? $786,000.
See, and that's one of those areas that shouldn't be shut off. There's no issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, the
It's critical
hospital's there,
infrastructure.
you know, everything. And so that's the push that we need to make, that don't shut it off. We won't need a generator if you don't shut it off, so.
And we've.
The same goes
we've
for many of the
made that very
restaurants.
clear.
Yeah.
The Hospitals, jails, critical infrastructure that needs to stay up.
But based on your direction today, we will agendize a separate future agenda item in which all departments can come and talk to you about their needs under this allocation, because not all departments have weighed in. We've certainly heard from some. There's not a lot of money here, but I'm sure there's a number of good purposes we can put it toward.
Thank you for that information. Okay. So moving back to 7.2, I know we went over this quite a bit. We came back to it. Today, obviously, we are looking for some
Offer a
direction.
resolution?
Yes.
Hold on one second, if I may put a hold on it. I was hoping we can have a conversation about the tax auction, since I was looking at offering to allocate one extra position, because of the information that's within item 7.6 would be the same information that I would be using to discuss the allocation of that position. So wondering if we can cover 7.6 prior to finalizing 7.2.
Yeah, makes sense.
Is the board okay with that?
Yeah, that's good.
And with that in mind, I did ask for
I
the,
withdraw my offer of the resolution.
Okay.
I did ask for
Thank
the
you, Brian.
treasurer tax collector to come down in, it would be about another 10 minutes, because I didn't anticipate you wanted to do that first. So she should be here shortly.
Okay.
You could take up 7.4 while you
Well,
wait for her.
yeah, Kathy's here for that.
Kathy is here, yeah. So we'll go to item 7.4, consideration of a report on the teeter fund by Auditor Controller.
We can do 7.5 pretty quick too, huh?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Kathy, are you going right to the slides? We have the lights on.
some handouts if you want to follow this way, especially for Rob, because he sees it on the paper.
Real funny, real funny.
Have you been watching today's meeting?
I've been waiting
waiting.
anxiously.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Kathy Saderland, your Auditor Controller County Clerk, and I have with me Amanda Johnson, my Property Tax Audit Coordinator, excuse me.
Good morning.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to.
Can you put a copy of the handout at the front studio? Excuse me, Kathy.
Okay. Thanks for the opportunity to discuss with your board the county's teeter plan, as well as provide you with what I hope is some relevant data as a result to address the recent request your board received from the city of Clear Lake regarding the teeter plan. So here's a brief definition of teeter, which I think is what some of you were interested in. The teeter plan is an alternative method of allocating property tax revenues. And it can be a combination of secured, utility, assessments, and/or supplemental taxes. What the teeter plan does is it provides for participating jurisdictions to receive their full assessed property tax regardless of collection. In return, the sponsoring county takes on the burden of the delinquent property taxes in exchange for the penalties and interest on those delinquent taxes. And in the first year of implementation, the county buys out the delinquent roll. The benefits of the teeter are that jurisdictions are provided with a more stable and reliable annual property tax revenue stream. The county receives the penalties and interest on the delinquent property tax collections. And the property tax estimation and allocation process is simplified for all jurisdictions. County and jurisdictions, all those receiving part of that 1% property tax allocation. So, in case you're interested in some of the history of the teeter, it was first enacted in 1949 per R&T Code Section 4701, and there were 5 counties originally within that. And one of the originating counties actually was Contra Costa, and that's where you get the name Teeter Plan. It's from Desmond Teeter. He was an auditor controller of Contra Costa County. So those are the 5 originating counties that participated. And what the idea was for him was he wanted to expand and incorporate revenue and taxation code. And on October 1st, 1941, that actually happened, and it was codified. In 1993-94, after a large shift of property tax dollars by the state, the state legislature offered a one-time credit, and they referred to that as a teeter credit, for all those counties that would opt into the teeter plan. And as of 2015, there's 90% of California counties that participate. Lake County's teeter plan originated. Lake County was one of the counties that saw the benefit in 1993-94 with that legislation that offered the one-time credit. So Resolution 93-234 was adopted by your Board of Supervisors, and then Resolution 96-187 authorized the county treasury to actually fund the county, the Lake County teeter plan for secured taxes only. We didn't take on the added burden of assessments or any other taxes other than secured. The initial buyout of that was $4.3 million, and it was a combination of the county treasury and the one-time credit that was provided by the legislature. Lake County maintains all the statutory funds required for the teeter plan. The first one of that's listed there is the tax loss reserve, and that's where it receives all the penalties and interest and unclaimed proceeds from defaulted properties, and is currently maintained at the statutory minimum balance of 1% of the secured roll per R&T Code 4703. And it is expected to cover the losses that occur as a result of tax defaulted land sales. There's an alternative option, which is R&T Code 4703.2, which requires 25% of the total delinquent secured taxes. And that number is a significantly higher amount than the historical 1% method that Lake County has used. Both options are calculated on an annual basis and comparison for potential conversion if the need arises. The second fund we maintain is the Tax Resource Fund, and that's where all the receivables, collections, distributions are calculated and apportioned. So based on the City of Clear Lake's request of your board, with the 10-year trending in mind that they requested, we prepared some data. And so what you see here are your 10-year statistics that illustrate the teeter secured base tax penalties and interest broken out. So as you can see, the base tax fluctuates, and again, these are our teetered secured, has fluctuated from a low of 63 million in 2016 to a high of 67.2 in 2019. Penalties and interest have fluctuated from a low of 912,000 in 2010 to a high of 2.1 million in 2017. The chart here, I know it's probably kind of hard to see, but it illustrates the base tax is the darker color, and then the penalties and interest are the lighter color, which then you see the total of the two combined. So going back to the two funds that we're maintaining, this is the Tax Loss Reserve Fund, and that's maintained at that 1% statutory amount. And so you can see in fiscal year 2019, it's maintained at $680,750. It fluctuates, not greatly. The 10-year average is $651,744. Then we have the Tax Resource Fund. And as you can see, again, the delinquent secured has fluctuated throughout the years with a 10-year average of 9.3 million. And this is the amount in the teeter fund that is held for exactly that purpose, to cover your teeter liability. Your transfers to your general fund for the penalties and interest and the unpaid tax, base tax, that's what this slide illustrates. And for the past 10 years, you can see that it's very volatile, and the 10-year average is 2.1 million, but there have been years where the teeter transfer we were only able to transfer 800,000. So there's a wide gap there.
I have a question, if I may interrupt. Do those show possibly when there's no tax auctions? Like if there's a tax auction, we would receive the fines and we would receive all the extra penalties that go along with not paying taxes, and then we would receive those base taxes.
Yeah.
Would that be the drop-off where we don't have those?
You're always going to see a lag, so it's going to probably be the year following that you're going to see the dip, the fluctuation. We do have, I do have in here the years where a tax auction has been held, and there's only been 2 years in the last 20 years that I could identify that have not had a tax auction. So we've consistently had those tax auctions. It's just been 2 years in the last 20.
Could be the amount of homes too.
So although, it's difficult to predict these future, what the transfers to the general fund are going to be, those numbers there and that amount your board does rely on that for your ongoing budgetary needs. This transfer to the general fund is a big portion of your discretionary funding that you get in your, that you determine the spending of each year. So, pretty quick thing. In summary, the benefits of the teeter for both the county and the taxing jurisdiction are that a revenue base can be relied upon by the agencies. It's an investment tool for the county in the form of penalties and interest, and it's our support, our revenue stream support for our local jurisdictions, and it does simplify the property tax estimation and collection process. I think that's it. This slide just gives you where you can go. If you have any questions about property tax in general, or just some of the detailed information on the AB8 and those jurisdictions that participate, you can go to that website and you can click on there and follow the links to the property tax division portion of the website.
Supervisor Swalton.
So I have a couple of questions. One is, what is the threshold the teeter tax must meet before any above that amount gets placed back into general fund? Is it $10 million, 9 point something million dollars?
You have the two funds that I identified. You have the tax resource and the tax loss fund. One is the statutory 1% that can be also the 25% based, and then you have to hold in the teeter fund your delinquent roll to cover your accounts receivable, your original buyout of the teeter.
Sorry. And I know that it's based on a 1%, which means obviously it's never, the 1% of all property taxes is never a constant number. It's always fluctuating. But what would be typically the balance, a full balance amount for those two budgets?
It's not a budget, so I'm trying to
Well, it's not a
follow
budget,
here.
but it's an account.
There is no maximum. It's based on the teeter amount annually. The teeter amount fluctuates year to year, so it's based on your total teeter, your secured delinquent.
And our total teeter amount for 2019 was that the
9.1.
9.1, okay. Okay. And so it's when.
And that's your secured, but then you have this additional amount that's there to hopefully absorb any tax deficit sales from tax defaulted.
And it's when it goes above the 1% that amount goes back into the general fund because of repayments or whatever amount?
In the tax resource fund, that is correct. Those monies are moved around and they're all balanced out.
Okay.
On an annual basis.
And just to, I know we did this in 1993 to at least start this off. And I'm not sure about the age of any of our specific fire districts, but if a district was created post 1993, would they not be in the base tax that gets funded if somebody doesn't pay their property taxes?
All agencies when the teeter plan, when Lake County adopted the teeter plan, there were public hearings, there were individual jurisdiction meetings, and all opted in. We don't have any that opt out.
But if anybody was created post of 1993, which I'm not aware if there are any or if there are none,
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. But if let's say today we created a new district, whether it's a fire district, whether it's a healthcare district, whether it's whatever district, they would not be receiving from the teeter if somebody did not pay the property
They
tax?
wouldn't be receiving any of the AB8, and these are the AB8 jurisdictions. So they wouldn't be there anyway. They wouldn't be involved in this at all.
Okay, any more questions from the board? Okay. Thank you very much for putting this together. Appreciate it.
I do have one more question, and it's the last one. I know I've been in your office often to discuss both the teeter and tax auctions, and we are going to discuss tax auction, or at least the tax auction, but I'm looking more in the general terms of tax auctions. Having them regularly, I know from your and I's conversation, is a good thing, and is something that the teeter, it's good for the teeter, it's not bad for the teeter. You've always warned me about decreasing any of the costs of those properties because that means the teeter would not get the refund that it's owed for those properties that were funded. I get that, and I'm sensitive to that. Is there a point where we increase to too many properties where there's a caution that you want to throw at us? Or if we doubled our auction, as we've discussed, moving from 300 to 600, or what I'll discuss later on in 7.6, is there a point where there's any issues with teeter and I don't think there is, but I want to put the question out there since I have you right here, right now.
The number of parcels that are offered for sale doesn't have an impact on the teeter other than just the mechanics behind for the auditor's office property tax division for what we handle once those tax sales happen. But for the teeter, it's the deficit sales that would be an issue. And it's not just an issue for the general fund, it's an issue for all of those agencies that rely on that because they will suffer if there will be a reduction for them as well if base tax is not recovered.
Right.
And the only other thing that I want to kind of piggyback on what you said is I have heard discussion about, waiving penalties and interest. And I don't know statutorily if the tax collector can even do that. That's her in her house. But that is what makes your teeter work. So if you were to do that, your teeter wouldn't work. And it wouldn't be I wouldn't ever recommend that you waive those penalties and interest for not just the teeter, but just in general.
Yeah, one of the things that I know I look at when we talk about decreasing, it's abatement costs would be something to maybe look at. But at the same time, that would hurt somebody who had to pay the abatement. But it's all a discussion to have. I don't think it should be a grand discussion and we're going to do 1,000 properties and all reduced price. I think it needs to be specific reasons as to why there would be a reduction. But it would have a harm on the teeter for any kind of reduction that we do for the fact that.
Those are direct assessments. Those are not part of teeter.
Right.
Any of those abatements, any of your, bonds, any of the fees that are put on there, additional direct charge fees, those are not, we don't teeter those.
Right.
There are some counties that do that and they do, it becomes problematic. Lake County, when they did secured only, which is just a very conservative way to do that, to safeguard.
Excellent. Any more questions from the board for Kathy? All right, go and open up any public input on this item. Seeing no public input, we'll go ahead and, is there public input? You can come up to the mic, please. On this item here, the teeter fund.
Pardon me?
On this item here, on the teeter.
Yes, on the teeter. Just one question. Last time when you were talking about this, we asked how much was approximately, when we were talking about $18.3 million in defaulted properties, revenue not being received. You indicated that that was incorrect, that it was only, $9 million. So what if I understand correctly, then the teeter, the 9.18198,154 in 2019, basically took care of that 9 million of that 18 million. And then the other, the bonds, the direct fees from fire districts, et cetera, are in that other 9 million that's not covered by the teeter.
And I apologize if I misled. I don't know for sure what that other amount is because I don't know your underlying data for that. But what I can say is for the teeter, it's the 9 million. And then, yes, I could look at the tax roll and I could see those additional, the bonds and the direct assessments. That did kind of make up that gap. But I can't.
No, I understand, but assuming 18.3
I was trying to focus on the
is-
teeter because teeter got kind of wrapped into all of that conversation.
Well, I was really pleased to watch your explanation of what exactly teeter was. I had obviously no idea 3 months ago, so I appreciate the education on that part of it. But again, the teeter is 9 million and whatever else that's for bonds and school districts, fire districts that are direct fees are not covered by teeter.
Yeah. That additional tax debt that's on there is fairly significant.
9 million plus.
Okay, any more public input? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board.
I do want to make a request that I think it's good for us to know the health of our teeter fund, just in case that we're making decisions that affect it, and just to get a quick, brief review during budget time to know where we stand and if it's still able to support us, or if we need to look at what actions we've been taking to make sure that it has longevity, because I think it's important that the teeter lasts for a very long time, if not forever, to make sure that it continues to do what it's been doing to support the jurisdictions that are benefiting from it when people don't pay their taxes.
So you're looking for during adopted budget, correct? Because it's after the roll, it's in July and August that we're working some of these numbers. We don't look at it on a monthly or
No.
quarterly basis, it's an annual basis because we have to know what the next year's tax roll is gonna look like.
And then if it's easy for you to do it in October, where we do the final approval of the budget, that would be great. But I think at least once a year to get a glimpse at the health of our teeter fund would be a great way for us to stay apprised to it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, Kathy, thank you very much.
Could I ask a
Yes,
quick question?
go ahead.
Kathy, do you pay the taxing entities once a year or more often than that?
On the teeter, it's 3 times.
3 times a year. Thank you.
Okay, now, any other questions for Kathy at this point? Okay, Kat, thank you very much. Thank you both for coming down.
Absolutely.
Given the education process, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. You know what, I do agree with some of the comments Supervisor Brown said. Item 7.5, could we take that up? 20129, consideration of proposed findings of fact, decision, and appeal of Judson Hodges, AB 19-06.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are the findings of fact and decision. Your board had added an additional condition of approval requiring annual testing of water quality at the PG&E site. That is in the findings. With that addition, your board made a tentative decision to deny the appeal, and that's what these findings support. So if your board is fine with the findings as written, you can approve those by motion, and by motion deny the appeal.
Excellent. Any questions from the board? All right, any public input on this issue? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for action.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the proposed findings of fact and decision in the appeal of Judson Hodges, AB 1906, and move to deny the appeal.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you. All right, moving right along, we're going to go ahead and do item 7.6 and then come back to the budget items. That's what we're doing. All right. Item 7.6.
Thank you.
7.6. Oh, I didn't read the item. I apologize. 7.6, consideration of resolution authorizing the chairman of the board to approve and direct the tax collector to sell at public auction via internet tax defaulted properties, which is subject to the power to sell in accordance with Chapter 7 of Part 6, Division 1 of the California Revenue and Taxation Code, and approving sales below minimum price in specified cases. Welcome.
Morning.
Morning.
Okay, so we are coming in front of the board today to get approval to move forward.
Your microphone
Sam's
needs to
about
be
to
lit.
tell you to use the microphone.
Maybe it's not on. Hit the on button.
No, it's on.
Is on?
Okay.
Okay. Good morning. Start over. So we come before you today in order for approval to move forward on the tax sale, approve the resolution for tax deed land sale 157 to be held at the end of May 29th to June the 2nd at bidforassets.com.
Okay. Any questions? Questions from the board?
No, hearing none, we'll move on. Oh, sorry, Bruno. I didn't
Yeah, we
realize
haven't
you
heard
had
it
your
yet.
Pen up.
So I just wanted to state there's 217 properties on the list that we have. I know you had talked about 300, and I believe during our conversations, those are ones that were solicited for putting on the tax auction, but people chose to pay off their taxes prior to you having this complete list, because obviously you don't want to put someone's property on the list if they've already paid off their taxes. So I just kind of wanted to explain that we did start with a number, or close to, I don't know if you started specifically with that number, and it dwindled down based on people feeling the heat and paying off their taxes to finally get off this list of being put on a tax auction. I do appreciate that 118, at least when I counted, seem to be from the city of Clear Lake, and I know that you've heard us loud and clear that the city of Clear Lake has an issue. So I just wanted to make sure that I shared my appreciation for that. I know that this needs to be noticed for 60 days, is that correct? that once approved, there's 60 days before you can put it on the auction block or something like that? There's a 60-day waiting period between now and the auction?
There's several requirements. One, we have minimum of 45 days to notice interested parties. But it does take approximately 30 days for our vendor to provide us with the information for either bankruptcies and all the interested parties that we would notice.
Okay. And the vendor is Bid for Assets, you said?
No, Harmony Research is our vendor for
Sorry.
Harmony Research is for,
And I meant to say the contractor we work with for the actual bidding auction is Bid for Assets, is that
Yes,
correct?
is
And I'm
Bid for
sorry,
Assets.
I misspoke. How does someone from the public, because this list will be made public, it kind of already is, since it's on the agenda and it's in one of our attachments, how does the public get prepared to be a part of this auction? Do they go to bid the number 4 and then assets.com and sign up, and then eventually it'll pop up as one of the possible auctions that they can be a part of? What's the process so we can make sure and educate the public the best way possible to look at this list so we can get the most amount of properties sold and get new property owners?
yes. Once the list is board approved, it will be on our tax collector's website also, the basic information. They will have to go to Bid for Assets and register as a bidder, but they can only do that approximately 30 days prior to the actual auction starting.
Okay. Is there a simple like how-to on your website for those who are interested in being a part of this auction?
For the actual bidding process, we refer them directly to Bid for Assets.
Okay, okay. Because I think that's important that, I mean, I'm going to try my best with 118 properties in Clear Lake to get as many people interested in wanting to get those properties, especially those who have an interest and a vision of what kind of development or what kind of changes they might make to them. But I think that's a goal that we should all have, is to make sure that we see these things as not just a list, but successful in the selling of those on the list. So there's 217 properties on the list, and if we look at the grand scheme of things, and I know that there's paper parcels in this and there's others, but there was 12,500 properties that are in tax default in some way, shape, or form. At 217, it would take about 40 years to go through the entire list, because it was only about 2.3% of our entire properties on that list. And that is if there's no new properties that get added on to the list, and that's just an impossibility. There's always going to be newcomers, because we're never going to get 100% of the population to pay their taxes.
If Prop 13 passes next week, you can see it probably double.
So next week does not change property taxes.
No, it'll go
It's the
up.
one in November. Yeah, next.
Well, when the election, okay, let's
We'll
prolong the
we'll-
misery for 6 months.
We'll discuss it afterwards. There's two propositions that changes Prop 13. This one does not. What I'm trying to say is, and I appreciate the effort, you told us what you would do, and you started off with that number, and now this is what we have because of those that paid their taxes. I am asking the board to look at that in a time frame of potentially 40 years to dwindle down and bring it down to maybe a less overwhelming number of properties. We are, through the administrative office, we are adding somebody to do specifically the tax auction, which is what came out of the ad hoc committee. And I appreciate that, and I know we're going to be successful in bringing that number up. I know that we've also discussed maybe doing 2 tax auctions, which, let's just say maybe we can do 600 for the year with the added personnel and the 2 auctions. That would still be now dwindling it down to 20 years. And in my opinion, if we're serious about economic development, a 20-year plan to put properties on the tax auction block for people to want to say, yes, I want to invest and I want to do something in Lake County is too long. I want to see it dwindle down, and I think we have an opportunity, if we're serious about economic development, to add 1 other personnel in the near future to make that at least 3 people, if not 4, because I believe you have 2 positions in your department that help out with the tax auctions. I know you were down to just 1. But then we're adding the one in under the administration, and I'd like to add another one, because if we can dwindle that down to 10 years, and again, there's always going to be more properties added in because people are not always going to pay their taxes. But when I look at this as in 40 years, if it just sits still and we continue as is, we are not pushing hard enough. I would really like us to push harder. And I'm not looking at you, Barbara, right now. I'm looking at us to make that decision. I think that you've pulled through and done what we asked you to do. So I think that we should look at the numbers and see how fast change will occur at the rate that we're going at. But I would like for us to review and look at what a new position would cost us and what kind of capacity that position might have to add more. My goal is 1,000 properties every single year.
And actually, if I could clarify, for the 12,000 parcels that are delinquent, they're not all eligible for tax sale at this point.
Yes,
So,
yes, that is a
So some could be
clarification.
in active payment plans and maybe 1 year delinquent or, along those lines. So it's not the total number, it's not the number that's eligible.
Do you have the number at this point? Do you know the number or range?
Range is probably even half of that,
It was about 50%.
yeah.
About 50% of that, so.
And and
Nice to
included
hear
in
the
that are
big
the,
numbers, but knowing exactly what would be available for tax sale is, I think accurate to get out there to the public also. That's not 12,000. Potentially, it's 50% of that.
right. And then a good portion of that are the paper subdivision lots, so that are not.
So it could be even less. Okay. All right, any more questions from the board?
Oh, I have a question. So that 20 years that you came out, is that the full delinquency or 50%?
Because the idea that I have is you're going to have more people that don't pay their taxes. You're going to have some that pay. So eventually things slide on down. Some things don't get paid. Some
Right.
things stay that we even try to put on the tax auction that don't get sold. There's always going to be a remnant somewhere based on our action or our inaction that creeps along. So I don't think that number is necessarily going to
It's going to
dwindle.
grow. And I know you think that $15 billion tax initiative next week is not going to affect our taxes, but it's not, it will. And the same with fire departments, the schools, all the local stuff that's on there. All the properties that are burdened with these sales, there's a reason that they are. Because people can't afford them. And we got to work on that too. So there's two ways to look at it. We can't just keep selling people's homes out from underneath them and say, well, they didn't pay their taxes. Well, maybe we need to, collectively as a government, need to do better with the money that they're giving us and not keep continuing to add more and more to it each year. So, there's a lot to it.
And I
Advocate for those things
Thank
as
you.
well.
And I don't disagree that different situations require different actions. But I think as a whole, this is a burden on our fire districts. This is a burden on our healthcare districts. This is a burden on our schools. If you don't pay your taxes, you're not getting those direct charges, as was just discussed from our teeter presentation. And for us to not try and dwindle that down and say we really want our fire districts to get the maximum amount of money that they can get, rather than saying it's going to take us this many years to have a much more manageable amount, I don't think we're doing our community a great service. We're not doing a disservice. We're trying, we're doing something, but I think we need to try to do more.
We can do more, and I agree with that. We need to make sure that these things are moving and, get people motivated to pay, but we also need to realize why it is that they're going delinquent to begin with, many of them. Not all of them. We can't speak in general terms here, but many of them are becoming delinquent because people can't afford to continue to pay more and more and more each year. It's going up, and it's in the, with all due respect to the agencies that you talked about, schools, fire departments and all that, their employees make a lot more than the county employees do. There's $130,000 per year per classroom that goes to the schools. That money's not going to the classroom, but the taxpayers in the state of California are already paying $130,000 per classroom. So it's not reasonable to expect that they need to pay more because we want to prove that we care more about our kids. I care less about the administrators and the bureaucracy that's eating up all that money and not seeing it. So we need to do something about that at that end as well. So.
Thank you, Supervisor Brown.
Actually, wasn't done yet.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Tina, sorry.
So sorry.
Either was Bruno. Just for-
Well, that goes from 9 to noon.
You know, I agree with Supervisor Sabatier, we need to be doing a better job at hitting some of these properties harder, selling more of them. Is there a way that we can take the focus off the paper parcels since, and be focusing on properties that we know will actually bring in revenue, or is there a way, or is that not how we focus our sales?
We are focusing on the other properties and not on the paper subdivision.
Because you were saying part of these properties, there was
Yeah,
paper
not,
parcels?
not the properties that her department focuses on. They're looking at properties that can sell, not properties that are landlocked, have no infrastructure. Those are the ones that we need to figure out a different pathway for. But I know that she's looking at what is sellable, what is
Yeah.
attractive, and what's needed to be sold.
And then from that, if we were to
Could
up
have
the,
the tax collector answer those questions, I think that'd probably be the best one.
and if we were able to increase the amount of properties that we are selling, could we use that revenue to pay for an extra person with the fees and the penalties? Could that be something that we could budget in, or is that not how that's budgeted?
Conceivably, yes. But there's also a workload associated, like if you have a couple of accountants cranking out the work to ready the tax sales, there's additional work that needs to be done in the tax collector's office to handle that volume. So if you added another position to do the work that the first position is intended to do and do more of it, wouldn't you also need another position above that position to take the next steps?
Yes.
That's kind of what I thought. Yeah, there would be a bottleneck if you added another worker like the one that is being added now. You'd have to address that bottleneck somehow, all of which is doable. The worker that's being added now to support this process is also doing more than just preparing sales, properties for tax sale. And Barbara, maybe you could elaborate on the additional things he's going to be doing to hopefully get people to pay even before it reaches that point. Could you speak to that?
Right. They would also be reaching out to the taxpayers well in advance of the tax auction, contacting them, offering, explaining payment plans, maybe finding out also if there are other issues as to why they're not paying the property taxes. So we would be able to be more proactive in contact and outreach to the taxpayers. That alone would be very beneficial. Right now, we don't have the staff to do that.
Question. On that, when we do send the delinquency notices out, on that notice, because I know that's really scary to get in the mail that you're delinquent on taxes, does it explain on that paper how you can have a month-to-month payment, that they'll work with you? It's not just you need to pay it. How is that described to the person when they receive that letter in the mail that their property's taxes are delinquent?
The final notice, there are several stages that we have to publish. We have to send annual notices. So in some of those notices, it does explain, payment plan options. But also that would be where staff could be a little bit more proactive and actually send the agreement out with the tax bill and ask them to contact, if we don't have their phone number, which majority of the taxpayers, we do not, to call our office and we can discuss in detail their options and where they are.
Yeah, I just want to make sure the taxpayers realize that there is options.
Okay, Supervisor Sabatier.
I'll try to make this my last comment, Rob. I know that, again, for economic development purposes, from the city of Clear Lake, I'm hearing it loud and clear that a lot of their code enforcement issues are related to tax defaulted properties where people have pretty much just dropped those properties or aren't caring enough about their property to take care of it, both in taxes and physical abilities. And I don't have the numbers from the county. I did just talk to code enforcement yesterday to look at what those numbers would look like, but I'm willing to bet that it's at a high percentage. But again, I don't have those numbers. But I think those are numbers we need to look at when they come, because I think it does make a difference in showing us if we want to change what a community looks like, if we want to change what our property values look like. It's not going to happen until sometimes we have to get new owners for these properties. It's a very tough situation when it takes, like that gentleman, and I'm glad that we fixed it not too long ago, but 5 years of having blight in your community and nothing is changing. And some of these changes are going to require that we sell their properties for not participating in our community. Once I get those numbers, I'll make sure to bring those back to the board so we have a more accurate perspective. But that is definitely one of my perspectives as to why this is a benefit to our economy if we try to increase the numbers.
I think you're right. I think the broken window concept is, you get somebody in there who takes care of it, but it's a large conversation, and I'm gonna mention this only because Clear Lake is the one you're talking about, they're the ones that are pushing on this, but again, I go back to all, we have the school bonds, we have the water, we have so many things going on there, and, this is probably gonna, in 2018, if you go to Transparent California, the fire department, Lake County Fire, they have 44 employees listed. Some of those are part-time, many of them are. But the top 10, the taxpayers spent $1.25 million. That's a lot of money for a little town like that. $1.25 million for the top 10 employees there. So there's a lot of money that's being spent, that's being used by the taxpayers that can't afford that. So we have to look at all that. So.
Supervisor Crandall.
Oh, I was just going to emphasize what Bruno just said about the blight, especially in Clear Lake, Oaks, Lucerne, and Nice. Mainly, it's very similar to what he described about Clear Lake and how absent owners and delinquent owners, whoever occupies the home usually is the culprits in our blight in the city. So I just wanted to hit the sounding board on that and agree with you. And we necessarily discuss this similar discussion at the town halls. We don't have a city council to address this, but at the town halls, they say the same exact thing, that they'd like to see the tax sales done more often and probably a lot more of them, so.
All right, well, appreciate you bringing this to us. Today, we are talking about doing a tax sale. So obviously making sure that we're getting that done this year. I think as you move forward, a lot of good points have been brought up here, but as it goes, there's a lot of work that goes into these tax sales. Timing of the year, I think, is important too when we do these things. So when you talk about maybe having 2 a year, that may be coming up later down the road, and it's something we need to discuss. I definitely think that, but there's always going to be delinquent tax. It's going to happen. As Supervisor Brown was saying, it may even increase if some of these new propositions pass, Proposition 13. So we'll see what happens there, but we need to continually move forward with having these sales. If we can increase the numbers, I think you've heard it loud and clear from the board, that's where we'd like to move to. And those are my thoughts, and I'm glad that we're at least getting this through today and going to have another tax sale, and making sure we follow up and finalize all the tax sales. One question I did have with the other tax sales we've done since I've been on the board, have those been finalized out? Have we got all the money from the tax sales that we had done previously? I think there's been 2 since I've sat on the board.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, if there's no more discussion up here, we'll go ahead and go to public input.
Russ Kramer, City of Clear Lake. Most of what I was gonna say, I'd actually sent a text message to Supervisors Sabatier and Simon, who are representing at least parts of the City of Clear Lake. So Supervisor Sabatier, you covered most of those points, so I will kind of speed on, and I want to focus on a couple of the other ones. With regard to this initial tax sale of 212 properties, you know, Ms. Ringen, you had indicated 45 days for a notice and then 30 days for a vendor. Do those run consecutively, or do they run in tandem? In other words, is it a total of 45 days, which would include the 30 if they overlap, or is it a total of 75 days?
It would be the total, because we need the information from the vendor first before we can send out the notices.
Okay, so it'd be 75 days. Okay. From when it's posted, which would be, I assume, when this motion passes, which I'm going to assume it will. Is that correct? Okay. Then the one thing I did, the motion and the number of properties, is a good start. I guess you started with 300 properties and now we're down to 212. Is that a,
I don't have the exact number that we started with, but we did have numerous redemptions.
yeah. So that's just the act of going towards a sale and telling folks that their property may be sold has encouraged a huge percentage, almost a third of them, to pay their taxes. So I like that.
Yeah.
That's that pressure that we need to see on them. I would suggest in your motion that you put a timeline on it, that timeline be the 75 days, the 30 days plus the 45, or if you want to add a couple days beyond that, make it 80 days total, that auction actually takes place 80 days, not longer than 80 days after this. I don't want to see it drag into August or July or June even. So that would be my suggestions to the supervisors. Mr. Brown, you indicated Lake County Fire Protection District has this large payroll. You realize they're also the largest department in the county. They have almost twice as many annual calls as any other department in the county. They serve well beyond Clear Lake. They serve Lower Lake. They
Okay.
serve
so
other
that-
portions.
No, I get that. And I, that was not my point. My point, Kelseyville is the same way. They all, what we're doing is adding more and more fees. I'm not saying they don't do a good job or anything. You got, the top 10 are $1.25 million. Kelseyville is the same way. It's, their information is just not updated. It's 2017. It's the same, but we're talking about Clear Lake and all that. That's why I brought it up. I'm not, it's just an observation.
Well, I'm trying to answer that.
If it's not
and
accurate.
Put a little substance to
Okay.
it. And I think it isn't accurate. I think you need to do a little more looking into
So
it.
you don't think that the website
Oh, I think they're
is accurate?
probably getting what you say, but
Yeah.
I would look to see how what that's covering. But the point I'm trying to make here.
Covering everything.
The point I'm trying to make is that department covers far beyond Clear Lake, which, by the way, that little town is the largest city in the county with nearly a quarter of the county's population. We want to move forward. We're enacting vegetation management the same as Lakeport is, the same as the county is. We're being held up because a lot of these properties are sitting out there not being sold. And as pointed out by Supervisor Sabatier, they're generally the ones that we find the blight on, the ones that we're red tagging, that can't be sold because they got this tax situation hanging over them, so buyers are not willing to assume those taxes. So they have to be taken care of. You talk about the folks, and I can empathize with folks that are have bad times, but let's also consider the folks that are paying their taxes all this time. Have I run out of time, or may I go on?
Yeah, I think you're out of time. It's just my timer's being weird.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think there should be a time limit. I'm
No,
hoping
I'm
that
just
we
saying we
allow him
didn't
to,
start
yeah,
there.
okay.
Keep going, Russ.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought. At any rate, where was I? Yeah, the additional burden you got to think about also the additional burden on the taxpayers, the ones that are paying and carrying those that are not paying their taxes. So there's two ways of looking at things. And we have to look at what's best for the overall county. And I have a lot of empathy for folks that are going through hard times. We have a lot of nonprofits that I'm connected with that we're trying to help those folks. But that's not the point here. We have to get these properties sold or get them moving down there. As Supervisor Sabatier says, I would agree that we need to be looking at 1,000 properties a year, whether that's 3 sales of 300 plus or 2 sales of 500, however it is. I think a minimum of 1,000 properties a year is what you need to be looking at to bring this problem down. This is a mess. We have to clean it up. This is our revenue. This is the revenue of the county. Number one, it's also keeping properties that could be and should be developed. There's, on this list, I found 3 that are along Lakeshore Drive that are commercial properties. We need to get those developed. We have developers that are interested in our city, and we want to get them in here, but we can't do it if we have these tax situations hanging over the heads or hanging over these properties that are thwarting our efforts to get investment into our city. And same thing with the county. You should be looking at it the same way. I'm talking about the city of Clear Lake because I'm its mayor, but I'm also a citizen of Lake County, as all of us are, and we need to get this problem solved. So I would like to see you add a timeline to this first sale and make sure that it happens as soon as possible, and that we not wait another year before we do the next sales. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you talk about the timelines? They're set in stone already, correct? They're
Right, they are.
mandated timelines, so there's nothing that we need to address as far as the timeline for the sale. Today, we will be hopefully authorizing the sale, which we're here to talk about. That's what we're doing. And the timeframes are set out in that resolution as you move through the process.
Yes.
So I wanted to clarify that there are no, the resolution, there are mandates that you need to follow. If you could just let them know that, that'd be great.
Yes. The sale date is set for May 29th through June the 2nd, and there are certain requirements that we do prior to that auction start date. So noticing the interested parties, and I say that 45 days is a minimum. We would prefer to have the at least 60 days notice, but because of the timeline we are now, that is the minimum. So that is where we are, but we cannot extend it to August. The sale has to be May 29th through June the 2nd.
Thank you very much. Dirk.
Dirk Sloten, Vice Mayor of the City of Clear Lake. I urge your Board of Supervisors here to allocate enough resources to get this backlog of properties sold. It is creating blight in our city because obviously if a person doesn't pay their taxes, they're not going to take care of their property. Clear Lake is trying to revitalize itself, and we need your help allocating enough resources to get the tax collector to be able to do these sales. Please do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirk. Any more public input on this item? Okay, bring back the board. Supervisor Sabatier?
So looking at May 29th through June 2nd, I assumed when you said that was a registered date with the contractor to do the auction on. So those are already set and ready to go. And that looks to me like it's on the 85th day or something around less than 90 days from today, which it would take time anyways for the notice to go out and everything else. So I think that's within the time frame, and it's already set in stone, so that's what we're going to stick with. I do want to mention something, and while I represent District 2, I also represent the county. And I appreciate the fact that 50% of the properties on this tax auction were from the city of Clear Lake. I don't see it as being fair that we keep going with 50% being from Clear Lake forever. So we have to figure out a way to keep that number so it keeps reducing from the city of Clear Lake, but we also grow to keep reducing for the rest of the county as well. Because I believe places like Hidden Valley had 1, Middletown had 1. That's not what District 1 needs. District 1 needs more properties to also be flipped to get a new homeowner for those properties that aren't being paid for or taken care of. So I don't see moving forward at the same pace and being fair by always pushing and pushing and pushing for Clear Lake to get a fair number, a good number. So to me, let's look at the whole, let's expand, and let's keep pushing so that everybody gets a fair deal with what's happening.
Right, and we do look at the whole county when we are selecting the
And I agree, as a board of supervisor, which we sit on this diocese, it's always to think about the entire county. Yes, we represent our districts, but the overall welfare, so it doesn't matter if you're sitting in the city of Clear Lake or city of Lakeport. When we sit here on Tuesdays, we represent the entire county, so I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and I see it the same way, only maybe a little different perspective, where if Clear Lake does well, then the whole county does well. So I'm good with that too. I'm okay with that. I mean, I know we need to move it around and we're trying to spread it around and all that, but I think, Clear Lake has some things that they're working on right now that, we as a county should help them, encourage them. They got the road tech, they got a lot of stuff going on, and if they benefit from this, the whole county will. So I'm okay with that too.
Tina?
I think we also need to be looking, like you talked about, the blight and the code enforcement. I think we need to be focusing on those areas. I would have to think that Hidden Valley doesn't have as much blight. Maybe that's why there's not as many properties as we find in Nice Lucerne with code enforcement issues too, because they have their own homeowners association that doesn't allow their properties to get out of control. So I think we also need to be focusing on, code enforcement too, to get that money back also into our county if we've had to go in and clean up and there's been liens put on the property.
Right, but many times when that nuisance abatement is placed on the property, those properties don't always sell with that nuisance abatement added to it. So it increases the cost and it becomes, people won't bid on it.
I think the city will work with it.
Supervisor Brown?
I don't want to belabor this, and it's not my intention to single anybody out. We're talking about Clear Lake, so I mentioned the fire department, I'm talking about the schools, I'm talking about the colleges. There's a ton of fees that are on there. People in Hidden Valley, they're fortunate enough, like many of us up here, we can pay our taxes. We can bitch about it all we want and not want to pay it, but we do. There are a lot of folks in Clear Lake and some other areas on the North Shore and in Rivieras even, where it's a chunk of money. They're on a fixed income, their checks don't go up any, they have to pay more and more and more, and that's what I'm talking about. And it's not, I know it's generalized too, and Dirk mentioned that the people that aren't paying the taxes aren't taking care of their place, I know what he meant, but I want to elaborate on that. There are a lot of people that do take care of their properties that can't pay their taxes. I know a few people that I'm doing business with on my private business that have put up their property for collateral for somebody else. They can't pay their taxes. It's in my interest to make sure the taxes are paid. I go in and pay it for them and then try to collect it at the end. But in the meantime, they're trying to do what they can and they can't keep up either. So there's a broad, we've got higher and higher homelessness. There's a ton of stuff to consider when we talk about all the taxes that are being paid. And I'm not trying to single out any fire department or school or anything like that. These taxes have not always been paid over, most of our fire departments around the county 2 decades ago were volunteer. And now they're making good money. Whether or not they're taking it home in their paycheck remains to be seen, but the taxpayers are paying it regardless. Where the money's going, I don't know, don't care. Taxpayers are paying the money, and that's what we're here talking about. We're talking about taking away people's property. Not all of them are trash properties. Some of them are the only thing that these folks have, and the only thing between them and homelessness is a tax lien sale. So I want to be very careful about that.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, any more discussion?
Mr. Chair, if I may, just as a lawyer's point of clarification, so I'll apologize in advance. The resolution itself, the body of the resolution doesn't give a sales date. The sales dates are included in A, which is attached here, but what the language says is that the tax collector is authorized to sell the tax defaulted properties, a list of which is attached here too as Exhibit A, and by this reference incorporated. So what you're actually relying on is the statement of the treasurer tax collector committing to these sales dates of May 29 through June 2nd of 2020. I just wanted to make sure that you were all aware of that. It's not language in the resolution that commits that date, those dates.
Thank you very much, Anita.
But the resolution
Could be amended with those dates. Thank you for that clarification.
make sure they know. I don't care what they do.
All right, looking for action at the board.
I'd like to offer the resolution with the amendments of adding the date of the auction on May 29th through June 2nd, as offered by Barbara Ringen, our tax collector.
Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving back to item 7.2. Consideration of a resolution amending resolution number 2019-126, amend FY 2019 adopted budget by adjusting reserves fund, balance carryover revenues appropriations. B, resolution amendment resolution, amend position allocations FY 2019 and confirm the year budget. It's been a while, so I reread it.
Staff has nothing further.
I got a question from Bruno's request. I know what Bruno's position here is on that. Is there a way that we could, like we have with, we did with the benefit zone where we front the money up and then we get it back once the taxes come in? Is there a way we could use some money to fund that position that he's talking about and then have it come back from the sale, the tax lien sale?
Yes, but I think conceivably it might be need to be two positions to avoid the bottleneck issue.
Okay, well, I'm
additional.
okay with that too. And I
Potentially.
know there's some heartburn about creating more positions when we're, as we're going through our class and comp stuff, we're talking to department heads about actually cutting positions back. But I think, the argument can be made, I think everybody would agree, not many people would disagree, I believe, that the whole point of being able to fund a lot of what we're doing for our employees, for services for the public, comes from this type of thing. So I'd be good with that as long as I thought that money would come back. We're not cutting from something else that should be funded. At least we'd get the money back from that.
So we can absolutely explore that discussion with Ms. Ringen. She's been very cooperative. We appreciate, how the buy-in we're getting with the steps taken to date. And, but we would need to firm up exactly how that would work and how the bottleneck could be managed.
And I'd like to see the discussion maybe go to the ad hoc committee and then present it back to the board.
Sure. You bet.
Okay. What's the rest of the board house? We have consensus on that? Yeah. Okay. All right. So moving forward, we are looking for offering a resolution.
Just real quick, we would bring that back as to what the role would of those
Yeah,
positions.
it would be at a later date.
And if we're allocating something, it would be
Okay.
Brought
separate
back.
resolution.
Because I know we're doing part of it through your staff, and so I want to see how that looks, so.
And we might be able to just plan for doing it around the same time we address the ag
Yeah.
commissioner staffing issue as well.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Accepted? All right.
Thank you.
So we brought it back here. We need some action on the resolution at this point.
Resolution was offered.
Okay.
And is that A?
Okay.
Supervisor Simon,
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier,
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall,
Aye.
Supervisor Brown,
Aye.
and then Supervisor Scott.
Aye.
I offer a resolution B.
Supervisor Simon,
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier,
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall,
Aye.
Supervisor Brown,
Yes.
and Supervisor Scott.
Aye.
Okay. That takes care of, I think that takes care of everything on the
Sure does.
agenda. So we'll go ahead and go to closed session here. Conference with labor negotiator. A, Chief Negotiator, Hemlock County Negotiator, C. Carol Hutchinson and Pam Samick. And B, employee organizations, LCDDAA, LCDSA, LCCOA, LCEA, LCSEA, and LCSMA. Conference, item 8.2, conference with legal counsel, decision whether to initiate litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 45456.9 D4, one potential case. 8.3, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9 D1 EEOC complaint for Carrie McCormick. 8.4, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation to Government Code Section 54956.9 D1, Heart Consciousness Church versus Lake County. 8.5, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956, County of Lake, ETAL versus PG&E. And 8.6, conference with legal counsel, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956D2E3, one potential claim. And with that, we'll take a break for 5 minutes.